Ladies and gentlemen, this is an article that just came out in USA Today, November 2nd, 2017. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie on Opioid Commission's final report, Our People Are Dying. And I will leave the link to this article in the description box. Trump's Opioid Commission recommended dozens of sweeping policy changes on Wednesday to address the nation's addiction plague, including establishing drug courts in all of the country's judicial districts and requiring medical education for all opioid prescribers. Now, let me just kindly remind you that black people to this day are still going to jail for drug possession. But for these white addicts, they want to set up drug court so they can divert their drug possession sentence to treatment. That's the whole purpose of drug courts, ladies and gentlemen, to keep the criminal charges off of them and keep them out of prison. So when you hear them talking about drug court, that's what drug court is for. That's why they want drug court to be something separate and not part of criminal court. But when black people are picked up for marijuana and all these other drugs they're caught with, it's criminal court. For white addicts that are caught with drugs, it's drug court for them. And they get an opportunity to go to treatment instead of jail. See, they are still playing a lot of games through the legal system with the black community. And this is one of the ways they're doing it. All right, back to the article. In its final report, the Opioid Commission called on Congress and Trump administration to take more 50 specific steps, it said, would result in expanded treatment, stronger prevention, and saved lives. Our people are dying. 175 a day, every day, are dying in the United States from this plague. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, chairman of the Opioid Commission, said it's unacceptable not to step up to fight and do everything that's need to be done to stop the dying and stop the suffering. That's amazing. They weren't interested in any of those things for the black community during the crack epidemic. It was jail for everybody. Whether federal policymakers will act on the Commission's 131-page report, particularly some of its more expensive and contentious proposals, remain to be seen. And some advocates said the Commission's recommendation, while important, would not do enough to close a huge treatment gap for Americans in desperate need. So they're in desperate need. But crack addicts from the 80s and 90s are still in jail, did not get to go to drug court, did not get offered treatment, okay? Didn't get no sentences for drug possessions diverted. They're still sitting there. And because of the 3 strikes, you're out, many of them are in there for the rest of their lives, ladies and gentlemen. And there's a lot of them in there. That's why at the end of his term, President Obama was trying to get some of them out because there are scores and scores of our people still sitting in prison from the 80s and 90s crack epidemic, still sitting there. And nobody's doing a damn thing to get them out, but they are steady trying to do anything in their power to keep charges off of these opioid, heroin, meth heads that are out here. Unbelievable. While the report recommends some positive steps forward, it strives it starves the country from the real resources it needs to save American lives, said Chuck Ngola, a senior policy analyst with the National Council for Behavior Health. If there is no treatment available for Americans, how are we going to cure the plague? You're not. You're not. You see, something like this should have been set up maybe about 15 years ago. They might have had a chance of turning things around. You're now 20 years into this, and you got so many millions of people on these drugs, it's impossible to get it under control now. That's why I keep telling y'all it's not going anywhere. I don't care what they do at this point. It's never going to work. The Commission's report did not include a price tag for its menu of recommendations. While it called for more resources for everything from research to treatment, it did not endorse specific dollar amounts for those efforts. Well, Trump already said no new money. No new money. The Commission called for 56 specific policy changes, including creating uniform block grants for all federal opioid and substance abuse funding, making it easier for states to navigate the multiple grant programs currently available across several federal agencies, requiring healthcare providers to complete an educational program on opioids before they can renew their federal prescriber license, requiring states to share data from their prescription drug monitoring system as a condition of receiving certain federal money for those initiatives, establishing federal drug courts in all 93 jurisdictional districts across the country so those arrested for possession can be diverted to treatment instead of prison, giving the Department of Labor more power to crack down on insurance companies that discriminate against those with substance disorders. So they're going to force the insurance companies to take these junkies. That's what they're going to do. And believe me, read more into that. What it's going to also do is open the door for making employers hire these people. And this is all going to carry over into a lot of other things. I wouldn't be surprised if it also cracked down on insurance companies that refuse to insure these junkies. It's going to be all kinds of perks for these addicts since they are caucasoids. Just spending money won't be enough, Christie said. Adding the federal funding must be directed to programs that have been proven effective. Now it's incumbent upon Congress to step up and give the administration the resources it needs to combat the plague, Christie added. Trump created the Opioid Commission in March, and he has repeatedly promised to make the opioid plague a top priority of his presidency. Last week, Trump declared the opioid plague a public health emergency, a significant move, but one that fell short of the more sweeping state of national emergency the Opioid Commission had called for in July. There's a lot of people that are totally pissed at Trump for declaring this a public emergency. I have read so many articles, man. There's a lot of mad people out here. During Wednesday's final meeting of Opioid Commission, Christie lauded Trump for taking that step and said he was confident the president would move full speed ahead with the rest of the panel's recommendation. No, he won't. There will be fits and starts. and there will be moments of impatience, Christie said. But he added, never mind, I'm going over that. I don't know if you hear all that mess. Has nothing to do with anything. Earlier this month, Trump's pick for drug czar withdrew his nomination after a damaging news report detailed his role in weakening law enforcement powers to crack down on drug distribution, drug distributors. And in September, Trump's Health and Human Services Secretary resigned amid a firestorm over his use of taxpayer-funded charter planes for his travel. In Congress, several lawmakers welcomed the commission report and said they would look for ways to act quickly on key recommendations. But Republicans, who control both the House and Senate, are focused on tax reform and other pressing legislative business, and it is not clear if they will make this a priority. They won't. They would rather create tax cuts for rich people that don't need any money and ignore everybody else. That's exactly how they've been running this government. Christie and others said it would be okay. So Christie is pretty much saying he's counting on them looking at the report and following through on the recommendations, but I can tell you they're not going to do it. We are dealing with a brutal beast, said Massachusetts Charlie Baker, a commission member. We need to follow through and be as aggressive as addiction is. Well, good luck with that, Charlie. Sorry, Charlie. I just don't believe they're going to do anything big. Especially Trump already said he is not throwing any new money at this plague that's going on out here. So, no matter what they do, ladies and gentlemen, this is never going to work. You know, Trump has to do something because he ran his mouth on the campaign trail. But I think Trump knows this shit ain't going to work. But tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can, hit that notification button. Please do. Peace, family.
This is an article that came out October 6, 2017. Opioid Crisis Prevention Court is a new kind of drug court program looking to stop people from dying. So, ladies and gentlemen, they didn't have this during the crack epidemic. You know, they only had criminal court. You went to court, you went to jail, period. Now they have come up with all these new kinds of courts. Now they have like a separate drug court for these addicts. So in exchange for going for treatment, they don't have to go to jail. And in many cases, if they complete the treatment program, all charges of their crime dropped. So this is another reason why the crime statistics in America will never, ever be correct. Numbers will always be off because of this and other things, you know, slap on the wrist that they get that we don't get. So now they come up with all these new ways and all types of programs and drug courts to keep them out of prison. Don't recall them doing this during the crack epidemic. In fact, there's people from the crack epidemic still sitting in prison. And they never did any crimes. It was just a crime to themselves. Non-violent drug crime, but they're still sitting in there. Drug court is a common diversion program across the nation that attempts to keep nonviolent drug addicts charged with crimes by placing them in a supervised treatment program in lieu of the traditional justice system. See how they come up with all these things just for them? Oh boy. In exchange for successful completing the program, participants can often get a reduced sentence or have charges dismissed entirely. So they committed to crime, but it'll probably be knocked down to a misdemeanor or it's erased altogether. The city of Buffalo, New York, has a new experimental drug court program aimed specifically at opioid addicts. NPR reports that the Buffalo program, which is overseen by Judge Craig Hanna, is the first of its kind in the country. Opiate Crisis Intervention Court prioritized treatment over criminal prosecution. Isn't that amazing? It was criminal prosecution first for crack addicts. Right now, we're trying to save them. We're trying to save their life, Hannah told NPR. I want them to have another sunset, another time with their family, to see another Christmas. Yeah, whatever. This is why I don't feel any sympathy for these people, because see, when it's their time to be a big junkie, now all the rules have to change. Hannah's program differs from other drug court programs in that if a defendant expresses a desire to help in kicking his or her opioid or heroin addiction, the court defer ad so if as long as so in other words, as long as they stand in court and express their desire to get off the drug, the court will accommodate them. This is bullshit, y'all. I'm sorry. This is straight bullshit. Okay, right from arraignment, we put the clock on hold. We turn off the court reporter, everything off the record. So they get to talk off the record. Oh my. We're talking about getting you help, Hannah said. And once we get you help and you stabilize and get you stabilized, we put the criminal case back on the calendar. So once they express they want to go to rehab, everything comes to a standstill until they're done with rehab, and then they go back to the case and they have to return back to court. And I guess at that time it either gets reduced or thrown out altogether. Wow. While treatment is also a component of traditional drug court programs, it often takes weeks or longer to get the defendant enrolled in an inpatient treatment or detox program that could help them get sober, because a delay in treatment can prove fatal for those addicted to opioids. Time is of the essence. NPR reports that Erie County, which includes Buffalo, is on track to have the highest opioid overdose death total in its history. Wow. The county averages just over one overdose per day. John Flynn, the district attorney for Erie County, told NPR, "We couldn't wait 3 or 4 weeks until we got the individual into a treatment program or plan, because they didn't get it right away. They're going back out on the streets, shoot up fentanyl, and dying." In Hannah's program, participants go through 30 days of inpatient detox, followed by 30 days of outpatient treatment. They have to appear in Hannah's courtroom at 11 a.m. each day to check in with him and have a one-on-one talk. If they fail to show up for that 11 a.m. check-in, Hannah issues an arrest warrant. So the program also includes regular random drug testing and an 8 p.m. nightly curfew when participants have to check in with a court staffer and let them know their location. One-on-one and group counseling is also part of the program. Hannah's program was created in May with a $300,000 grant from the U.S. Justice Department. While it's too soon to draw conclusions about its success, the preliminary numbers show that it may be onto something. You know, it's anything just so these white drug addicts don't have to go to jail. That's what this is. They'll do anything to keep them out. But, they didn't go above and beyond for crack addicts. Of the roughly 140 defendants who have participated in the program so far, only 4 have washed out. Both the National Association of Drug Court Professionals and the Bureau of Justice see the program as promising, especially the intermediate treatment aspect of it. Christopher Deutsch, who is with NADCP, told NPR, this fast tracking is really unique and generating a lot of interest out there. Bureau of Justice Policy Advisor Gregory Terrain agreed. That's a big piece of it. That's very new. In the meantime, Judge Hanna is acting as a champion and a cheerleader for everyone who comes through his program. He told NPR, I always tell everyone we play by Vegas rules. What happens here stays here. You tell me what's happening. We're not going to charge you with new charges. We're going to give you the help you need because we know that this is an addiction. Okay, so when they commit a crime, it's not really a crime, y'all, it's an addiction. But we can't help you, Hanna added, until you're honest with yourself. So look at all the chances and opportunities these people get that was never allotted to the Black community during the crack epidemic. This is just amazing. But tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. My stomach is turning. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. This is going to be a quick video. Somebody had asked me about how many people are hooked on illicit drugs and opioids. And this is a report that came out in the American Society of Addiction Medicine in 2016. It's always 1 year behind. So when 2018 comes, that's when you'll get the figures for 2017. Opioids are a class of drugs that include illicit drug heroin, as well as illicit prescription painkillers, oxycodone, hydrocodone, codeine, morphine, fentanyl, and others. Opioids are chemically related and interact with opioid receptors on nerve cells in the brain and nervous system to produce pleasurable effects and relieve pain. That's why so many people don't even want to get off. They will fight you before they get off of these drugs. I was reading heroin addicts said they love the high because they said it gives them that feeling like they are in love. And they love that feeling and they don't want to give it up. That's why so many of them fight when you suggest rehab to them. Addiction is a primary chronic and relapsing brain disease characterized by an individual pathologically pursuing reward and or relief by substance use and other behaviors. Of the 20.5 million Americans 12 or older had a substance abuse order in 2015. 2 million had a substance abuse disorder involving prescription pain relievers, and 591,000 had a substance abuse use disorder involving heroin. So when you add up all those figures, you have over 23 million people abusing drugs in the US. It's estimated that 23% of individuals who use heroin develop opioid addiction. Drug overdose is the leading cause of accidental death in the US, with 52,404 lethal drug overdoses in 2015, Opioid addiction is driving the epidemic, with 20,101 overdose deaths related to prescription pain relievers and 12,990 overdose deaths related to heroin in 2015. From 1999 to 2008, overdose death rates, sales, and substance use disorder treatment admissions related to prescription pain relievers increase in parallel. The overdose death rate in 2008 was nearly 4 times the 1999 rate. Sales of prescription pain relievers in 2010 were 4 times those in 1999, and the substance use disorder treatment admission rate in 2009 was 6 times the 1999 rate. In 2012, 259 million prescriptions were written for opioids, which is one than enough to give to every American adult their own bottle of pills. That's ridiculous. And America actually prescribes more than any other country on the entire planet. 4 in 5 new heroin users start out misusing prescription painkillers. 94% of respondents in a 2014 survey of people in treatment for opioid addiction said they chose to use heroin because prescription opioids were far more expensive and harder to obtain. Impact in special populations: adolescents 12 to 17 years old. In 2015, 276,000 adolescents were current non-medical users of pain relievers, with 122,000 having an addiction to prescription pain relievers. In 2015, an estimate of 21,000 adolescents had used heroin in the past year. An estimate of 5,000 were current heroin users. Additionally, an estimate of 6,000 adolescents had a heroin use disorder in 2014. People also share their unused pain relievers, unaware of the dangers of non-medical opioid use. Most adolescents who misuse prescription pain relievers are given them for free by a friend or relative. The prescribing rates for prescription opioids among adolescents and young adults nearly doubled from 1994 to 2007. Women are more likely to have chronic pain, be prescribed prescription pain relievers, be given higher doses, and use them for longer periods of time than men. Women may become dependent on prescription pain relievers more quickly than men. 48,000 women died of prescription pain reliever overdose between 1999 and 2010. All right. And I will leave the link to this article in the description box. All right, right here. Pain reliever overdose deaths among women increased more than 400% from 1999 to 2010, compared to 237% among men. Heroin overdose deaths among women have tripled in the last few years, from 2010 through 2013. Female heroin overdoses increased from 0.4 to 1.2 per 100,000. Okay, so over 23 million abusing opioids and heroin in the US. And this is why you don't see any end in sight. That's a lot of people. You know, as I had stated before, that's a whole nation of people when you really think about it. There are countries that have fewer people than that. So tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. I will leave the link to the article in the description box. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can make a donation to my channel, please do. And I want to thank everyone that have made a donation over the past few weeks. I really deeply appreciate it. And I just want you to know that I think you are the greatest subscribers a person could ever have. And I really mean that. Peace, family. Article that came out in Newsmax October 3rd, 2017. Government's attempt to fix could be worsening opioid plague. The opioid plague in America is real. It is lethal, and it may be killing the nice family that lives next door to you. More people are dying of opioid overdoses than died of AIDS in the height of the epidemic. The death toll is nearly twice that from global terrorism. The crisis is so bad that it seems to be raining needles. Last March in San Francisco, 13,000 discarded syringes were collected compared to 2,900 in March of 2016. Coroners are experiencing personnel shortages and equipment failures across the U.S. In Berkeley County, West Virginia, 2/3 of the emergency medication budget is now spent on Narcan used to treat overdoses. Doctors are getting blamed. More potent oral drugs became available, and guidelines for using them in chronic pain liberalized in the pain decade of the 1990s. So why are we having the plague now when medical opinion is shifting in the opposite direction? Between 1999 and 2011, annual opioid deaths nearly tripled from 8,048 to 22,784. And the trend is accelerating, probably not coincidentally. Participating in the U.S. labor force started to decline at the same time, dropping to an all-time low of 62.4% in 2015. While many people evidently have trouble finding a job, one building contractor said he has trouble finding workers who could pass a drug test and it did not have a criminal record. The decades-long war on drugs has obviously failed. Some recommended legalization to reduce the profits from illicit drugs. That option is being tried for marijuana in some states. The odor of maturing marijuana plants in rural Oregon, has become so pervasive that people worry about getting a secondhand high. The drug cartel's profit did suffer. So the bottom line is the heroin that's coming in from Mexico is supposed to be of a much purer quality, and it's cheaper than OxyContin. So of course, the cheaper the drug, the more you're going to draw people to it. Really, that's the bottom line. Legalizing what was formerly called the gateway drug obviously hasn't reduced heroin use. The new gateway is now said to be prescription painkillers, and the chief villain are claimed to be legal pharmaceutical manufacturers, doctors, and pharmacists. Because the multiplying regulations and physician prosecutions, patients who urgently need pain relief are being left in agony, but the overdoses continue to mount, mostly on drugs not stocked at Walgreens, such as heroin laced with fentanyl, an extremely potent synthetic opioid. What's going on? On the demand side, Americans are well indoctrinated by the sea of advertising about taking a pill for every ill. Nearly 70% of Americans take at least one prescription drug. And I'm not shocked. I am not shocked, y'all. I mean, America, gives out probably billions in drugs every year to its citizens. And that's probably not, I'm probably undercounting it by saying that. It's outrageous how many drugs are prescribed in this country. As Paul Harvey predicted in his classic 1965 monologue, "If I Were the Devil," these trends would lead to metal detectors and drug sniffing dogs in school. On the supply side, profits are enormous. The largest seizure to date of 63.8 kilos of powder fentanyl, plus 30,000 counterfeit tablets found in a tractor-trailer rig at a checkpoint near Yuma, Arizona, had a street value of 1.2 billion. Most of the fentanyl comes from China, a turnabout from the Opium Wars. In the 18th and 19th century, the British smuggled Indian opioid into China, selling 1,400 tons per year. In 1838, writes Dr. Marilyn Singleton, with devastating effects on the Chinese economy and political stability. And that's exactly what's happening here now. This, like I said, this plague is going to be one of the reasons why America will collapse economically. This will be one of the reasons why it will, and they can't blame it on all the usual stuff, because believe me, the money they're pouring into this drug plague exceeds what they're putting into Medicaid, Medicare, and even welfare. It has long superseded those things. America's rival and enemies clearly benefit from the deadly craving that kills and disables a large portion of its U.S. population while imposing huge cost on the economy, also benefiting the multi-billion-dollar treatment industry, including the manufacturers of drugs used in medically aided treatment. Where are the drug sniffing dogs in schools where children are known to be getting addicted? And if taxi drivers know where drug trades are happening, the police know too, and yet they continue. Huge money laundering operations by the transnational drug cartels continue for years in upscale Florida suburbs despite undercover penetration by police, while pouring billions into costly treatment methods with 1 year failure rate of around 90%. And see, I was reading that the average drug addict, when they go through rehab, 90% of them fall off the bandwagon within 1 week after they get out of rehab. So, really, is it worth pouring all that money into treatment? I don't know, but I know it's going to break this government. The government continues to provide free opioid prescriptions to Medicare and Medicaid enrollees. Some of them sell them on the streets. And the Massachusetts Attorney General shut down a network of sobriety-centric primary care-based clinics with an astonishing high success rate and imprisoned the founder, Dr., and I'm not saying that name. Last name is Kishore. I can say that. His alleged crime, ordering too many urine tests. Wow, they put him in jail for that. He went to Wait a minute. He went to jail for ordering too many urine tests. Oh my God. Is there any way that such massive international trafficking could thrive without some level of political protection? And is the government attempt to remedy the problem making it worse? This government can't make this problem better because it is far out of hand. It's millions and millions of people abusing drugs in America now. How do you get that under control? You really can't. You know, They're really just going through the motions and making it seem like they're doing something, but they're not putting a dent in this plague at all. And it's quite obvious that they're not. Please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can make a donation to my channel, please do. Peace, family. Done stories on criminal activity that drug addicts do. I haven't done these recently, but I did one where they were robbing banks, robbing pharmacies and supermarkets. And this is what happens when they have a drug habit. You know, sooner or later, they run out of money, they run out of the drug, and they turn to crime. And in many cases, these crimes are felonies because what they'll do is they'll break into homes looking for any item they can take to a pawn shop. And now the new thing is they go to, you know, how sometimes they'll have an open house for a home that's up for sale. Well, what they're doing now, ladies and gentlemen, is they go through the medicine cabinet while they're touring through the house to steal the owner's medication. That's a new thing that they're doing now. So, I mean, they're coming up with more craftier ways to rob places. This is Oakville, Burlington, and you're going to see people up in Canada are doing the same thing they're doing down here in the US. All right, so this is a robbery, two men that robbed a pharmacy. Okay, and the pharmacy is called Shoppers Drug Mart. And this is the first guy, and these guys were together. This is the second. And they were after mainly opioids, narcotics. And they apparently got caught. And this is what they do. And these guys are going there armed, fully armed with guns, which make what they're doing a felony. So they can't even count this as a drug crime. All right, and here's robbers at a pharmacy called Atmore Pharmacy in Alabama. Let me go ahead and play this video.
Believe the recent pharmacy robberies in several area cities may be a part of a network of criminals targeting pharmacies. Two armed men stormed an Atmore Walgreens Tuesday night, just minutes before closing. This is surveillance video. The suspects you see there are carrying a tire iron and a gun, wearing dark clothes, masks. Atmore police say they forced the employees into an office, took prescription pills and cash before taking off.
Gosh, they were well equipped and well trained for what they was going to do. You can tell that.
I was just shocked. I was shocked, Yeah, because this don't normally happen around here, I was shocked.
That same store was burglarized back in May. Officials say this video is very similar to an armed robbery at a Walgreens in Grand Bay, May 17th. Detectives say it's likely the robbery in Grand Bay and this one in Atmore are connected as part of a network of criminals targeting pharmacies after hours and just minutes before closing while employees are present.
Okay. All right, and this article came out on the 25th of September, and I'm telling you, there's a whole bunch of these that come out every week from different pharmacies all around the country that get robbed. This is another one in Canada, Nova Scotia, and they're also, again, have a drug problem, and these junkies are going to these pharmacies and robbing it of the narcotics up there. You can see some of the firearms that they retrieved from some of these pharmacy robberies. I mean, this is serious. And as long as the drug problem is going strong, these robberies will continue to go strong as well. Here's a guy that robbed CVS twice. And this is down in Richmond, Virginia. And here he is right here. His name is Jesse A. Riddell, 28 years old. He apparently robbed the same pharmacy twice. During his robberies, the robberies occurred on December 11th and December 20th, with Riddle robbing the store of $322 the first time and $102 the second time. The citation notes that Riddle admit to the robbery, stating that he wanted money to support his heroin addiction and to buy Christmas presents for his son. Well, he got 10 years in prison, and it don't look like that's going to be happening for this guy. All right, here's another robbery, and this one is, and this just to show you how worldwide these pharmacy robberies, this one is actually in Bahrain, okay? I'm going to go ahead and play this robbery so you can see this is a worldwide problem with the drug addiction and the robberies.
بعدين اكيد معك قول لي حاجه ما يقدر زياد ساكن فوق ولا وين المشكله ولا لا عندنا محطه عندنا زياد الصبور هو من وين مسكين بس والله عندك مره ترى من اللي ضبط هو الدوريات اللي ضبط هو اللي ضيع راح المكتب عندك نظاره ايوه عندي لما تيجي اي حد يتعلم الحته كلها محلات اصلا ممكن تكون هلا هلا حبيبي.
All right, so again, this just to show you, this drug problem is worldwide. It's worldwide. All right, here is one in Palm Beach, and this is September 22nd, 2017. All right, and you can see the guy right here. He's identified as Michael Prouty, 33 years old. And it don't look like they caught this guy, but he's wanted for a string of strong-armed robbery in Boynton Beach. And it looked like it was 4:50 p.m. and he went in and robbed this pharmacy. And it looks like he took money from the cash register. Okay. And like I said, most of the time these guys are drug addicts, and that's why they're robbing the pharmacies in the first place. So, ladies and gentlemen, some things never ever change. And as you can see, the drug plague and the crimes associated with the drug plague is not going anywhere. I will leave the link to all of these articles in the description box. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family.
Okay, here's an article that just came out September 29th, 2017. Declining birth rate in Wisconsin, U.S. could be good or bad. All right. Wisconsin birth rate declined in the past decade, and the national birth rate hit a record low last year, causing some to worry about workforce and economic instability, while others applaud a dramatic drop in births to teens. If people are having fewer children, there's going to be a smaller pool entering the labor force 20 to 25 years down the road, said David Egan Robertson, a demographer at UW Wisconsin Applied Population Laboratory. But much of the decrease in the birth rate is driven by a significant drop in births to teens, which most consider a good thing. Many millennials are entering the peak fertility years of their late 20s and early 30s. So they could boost the birth rate soon, but millennials, they're not quite as interested in marriage and giving birth now. It's a positive thing, said Dr. Deb E. Rental, UW Madison Associate Professor. All right, so the state had 66,496 births last year, a rate of 61.3 births per thousand females ages 15 to 44, according to the State Department of Health Services. That's down from 72,757 births and a rate of 64.5 in 2007. Nationally, the rate dipped to 62.0 last year, a record low, with 3.9 million births. There were 4.1 million fewer babies born from 2008 to 2016, that expected based on previous birth rates, according to Kenneth Johnson, a demographer at the University of New Hampshire. At average of 1.85 births per woman, Wisconsin and the United States are below the replacement level of 2.1 births per woman, the level at which a generation can replace itself, Egan Robertson said. So we know that just from, the fact that 5,000 from a 1 year period, that you can't replace a population. You got to think about it even 20 years from now, when those 5,000 people get of working age, they can't do every job out here in the US. That's not enough. They're going to have a big problem. That could cause problems in the workforce and the economy in future years, along with challenges to programs such as Social Security, he said. However, immigration offset slow native population growth in the U.S. more than in places like Japan and parts of Europe. So the concerns aren't as great here. Yes, they are. That's why they're acting out. You can tell who got interviewed for this article. Okay, countries without active immigration are facing stagnant population totals, Egan Robertson said. Demographics say the Great Recession from December 2007 to June 2009 spurred the decline in the state and national birth rates starting in 2008. Birth rates typically go up after recessions end, but that hasn't happened this time, Egan Robertson said. This is likely because of the continuing drop in births to teens and women waiting longer to have children, he said. Oh, don't want to blame it on the genetics, huh? Because we know that's what it is. There were 2,807 births to females between the ages of 15 to 19 in Wisconsin last year, for a rate of 15.0 per 1,000 females that age. The rate has dropped 53% since 2007 and 66% since its peak in 1991. So they've been on a decline, ladies and gentlemen, for decades. This didn't just start. It really, from what I was reading, the decline really started in the 50s, and it went down from there. It's probably related, at least in part, to better access to effective birth control. The birth rate has been going up in Wisconsin among women in their late 20s and 30s. If this continues among the millennium, people born between 1992 and 2000, some say up to 2004, that could boost the birth rate overall. That's not going to do them any good, but let's go ahead. Older parents generally have more secure lives, which is better for children. The kids born will be more successful ultimately, so we could expect to see more robust workforce for that reason. Yeah, right. Okay. Nationwide, America is not having a lot of children, and it's a fact. It's been documented. It's a fact, and it's a reason why many of these people are acting out and acting so crazy out here. And you can see other articles based on what I have told you about in the past. The white population on this earth is getting older, okay? And all of the other populations on the planet are younger. And this is just another example of that. Map where your population is moving, aging, and finding work. And the population among the Europeans is aging. And you see right here birth rates low and lower. So this is a phenomena that's going on nationwide. And right now, the Europeans are all up in arms because they're fighting all of the immigrants and migrants that are going there, and they're outnumbering the white European now. And of course, they're petrified of that happening in America because they, this is why Trump is coming up with all these travel bans and all that crap, because they're petrified of all that happening here. So ultimately, the population's got to change. It's inevitable. I mean, all of this paranoia is just not going to change a thing in the long run. Um, but I'm just going to go ahead and, oh, there is one more I wanted you to see. Here's another one. Finland birth rate plummets to its lowest level in nearly 150 years. See, this is worldwide. This is worldwide. This is not just a US thing. Okay, Finland's birth rate is continuing to fall and has reached its lowest level in 148 years. The number of children born has declined gradually over the last 6 years, with 52,814 babies born in 2016, a figure down by 2,658 on the previous year, according to Statistics Finland. So, of course, it's frightening to them. It's frightening, you know? So, this is a phenomena that's global, but it's not among all groups on the earth. It's mainly hitting your Caucasoids. No matter where they are in this world, they are the ones with the low birth rate, especially in Europe and the US and Canada, Australia. Okay. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family.
Let's get some more of that good old American drug history. The greatest drug fiends in the world an American opioid crisis in 1908. See, in 1908, ladies and gentlemen, Black people were sharecropping. Black women were working domestically inside the homes of white folks, and they were being picked up on bogus charges like vagrancy and not having a job and laughing out loud in public. You know, those real violent crimes that we're told we're doing all the time. While we were in hard labor, our white counterparts were getting high. They were working hard at getting high. But let's get into this great American white bread history. In this illustration of McClure magazine story, a woman left displays her needle marks. Oh man, oh man. Genteel women with easy access to doctors and drugs made up the majority of late 19th century addicts. She's gazing down at those track marks on her arms, ladies and gentlemen, working hard at getting high. The president, a swaggering populist from New York, was worried that a national crisis of opiates addiction was weakening America and diminishing its greatness that it never had. So, in 1908, Teddy Roosevelt appointed a handsome doctor with a handlebar mustache. Yeah, right. He probably looked like a monkey with a mustache. Hamilton Wright to be the nation's first opium commissioner. See, they had to do the same thing back then as they do now because so many of these caucasoids were just straight up junkies. While we were working hard, they were working hard at getting high. Americans, right warned, have become the greatest drug fiends in the world. Now, what's going on now? The biggest junkies on the planet are in America. America leads the entire world in drug addiction. See, ladies and gentlemen, these people just simply can't change. They just can't change. But let's get a little more into this great white bread history. The United States developed a pernicious narcotic habit in the decades after the Civil War. Anguished veterans were hooked on morphine. Now, aren't the VA veterans of today hooked on opioids? Some things never change. Gentile society women dosed up on laudanum and tincture of alcohol and opium. So they were mixing alcohol and opium just like they are today. The wonder drug was widely used as a cough suppressant and proved very effective in treating diarrhea in kids. So see, look, they were doping up their kids with opioids, talking about it's good for diarrhea. Opiates were wickedly addictive too. And as more and more Americans began abusing them, their control became a cause célèbre for progressive era reformers like Wright. The habit has this nation in its grip to an astonishing extent, he told the New York Times in 1911. Our prisons and hospitals are full of victims of it. It has robbed 10,000 businessmen of moral sense and made them beasts who prey upon their fellows. It has become one of the most futile causes of unhappiness and sin in America, United States. More than a century later, America has relapsed. The current opioid abuse plague is more lethal, with record number of fatal overdoses, public health experts note. But it's not the first time in U.S. history that the lax commercialization of legal opioids led to a national plague. But see, this time the plague is worldwide. It's just that America has the biggest junkies in the world because they got the biggest people that are the most full of shit in the world too. So it all makes sense. The little-known history of America's first experiment with narcotic and the federal government response to it are today a source of optimism for those who argue that tougher regulation and enforcement can bring the current crisis under control. Well, it's been 20 years of waiting for you to bring it under control. I guess, well, whatever. That is your problem. Faced with a late 19th century dope scourge, doctors, pharmacists, and federal law enforcement officials eventually managed to contain the country's first addiction plague. And look, here's their soothing opioid cough syrup for infants, drugging up the infants, working hard at getting high. Miss Winslow will relieve gripping in the bowels. Sounds disgusting. Instantly cure when colic. Soothing syrup for children. Yeah, just drugging up the children so they can shut the hell up. That's what it was for. And its active ingredients was morphine. Yeah, I guess it was popular. Too lazy to deal with your kids, so you drugged them up so they could leave you alone. Over the last 150 years of drug use in America, when a problem has emerged, the government has responded, said the DEA official Sean Ferrens, the former director of the agency's small museum on the ground floor of its headquarters near the Pentagon. I wish we wouldn't have to keep learning about the dangers of these drugs the hard way, he said. But ultimately, the turning point comes only when people really begin to see the damage we are doing to our society. Well, you must not be seeing that at all, because y'all been drug addicts since you've been on American soil. But let's move on. Lesser waves of opiates abuse, especially heroin, returned several times during the 20th century, especially in large cities, and most notably in the 1970s, ladies and gentlemen. Drug use all through the centuries. America famous for being the biggest druggies the world over. But let's move on. But the late 19th century was the only other era in U.S. history where the opiates addiction was truly a nationwide crisis, scholars say, afflicting urban and rural areas alike, up and down the country's social and economic strata. Then, as now, it started with drug manufacturers, doctors, and pharmacists, not push-us on the street. The advent of the hypodermic needle. The sticky sap of the opium poppy has been relieving pain and getting people high for at least 5,000 years. Ancient Sumerians called it the joy plant. The Egyptians traded opium throughout the Mediterranean, and itinerant Arab merchants probably introduced it to China in the 7th century, just druggies worldwide. Opium became an engine of human commerce and conquest. English merchants, led by English East Indian Company, arguably the world's first modern drug cartel. The English, the first drug cartels. Okay, set up extensive colonial era opium supply chains that dominate sales in Europe and East Asia. When the Chinese emperors tried to stop them, the British waged the Opium Wars of the mid-19th century, occupying Hong Kong to make sure the drug markets remained open. Now, do you wonder why China is shipping over so much fentanyl and opioids to the US? Maybe it's revenge for those opium wars. But don't expect the Caucasoids to wake up. They just simply won't piece it together. So let's move on, ladies and gentlemen. English poets romanticized the recreational use of drugs. You know what? This makes me laugh because I read an article on heroin addicts saying they love the feeling of the high because it makes them feel like they're in love. And they romanticized about drugs. And by the time Thomas de Quincey published Confessions of an English Opioid Eater, Confessions of an English Opium Eater. Oh yeah, that sounds really romantic. In 1821, the British were importing tens of thousands of pounds of it per year. Historians said it wasn't until after the American Civil War that the use and abuse of opiates spread wildly across the United States. Some of the first addicts were morphine-dependent veterans of the war, suffering from all manner of physical and psychological pain, an infliction known as soldier's disease. Boy, they come up with these elaborate names. I just don't know what I'm going to do. So in other words, your soldiers were a bunch of junkies. You know, you really think about it, the most animated these people ever were was when they were lynching black people in the Civil War. Other than that, the history is already written. They didn't work. White people did not work during slavery. Okay, look at them old, probably drugged up morphine looking soldiers here. Let's move on. Go take a bath. Okay. Morphine was invented in the 1820s, but Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I got to get the phone. I'll be right back. You know, I love my family, but they have some rotten ass timing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on. Now, where was I? Morphine was invented in the 1820s, but it was the advent of the hypodermic needle that allowed the drug to be injected for the first time. The quick delivery to the bloodstream dramatically intensified the euphoric payload. Soon, syringes were being sold through the Sears and Roebuck catalog. You know, they also sold cocaine, ladies and gentlemen, in the catalog. Let's move on with DIY, do-it-yourself drug vials, according to the DEA's Ferns. Around the same time, you began to see an admonitory literature appear in medical journals saying, you need to be careful with this. Don't leave the syringe with the patient, according to David Courtwright, a leading historian on American drug abuse at the University of North Florida. For decades, opium, morphine, and other narcotics had been the active ingredients in an array of unregulated tinctures and cure-alls sold by neighborhood apothecaries. Itinerant peddlers or doctors making house calls. Oh, so the doctor came right to your house with the opium, huh? How convenient, ladies and gentlemen. Working hard and getting high. Just as the contemporary opiate crisis appears to have a gender imbalance, with increasing proportion of women getting hooked. The 19th century addict was typically female and middle class, according to Courtwright, author, Dark Paradise. The history of opiate addiction in America. Women were prescribed opiates after childbirth. Oh my goodness. And to treat female problems, menstrual cramps. Yeah, while the Black woman got nothing. Moving on. Many migrant workers from China who were hired to build roads and railroads and became addicts in labor camps and tenements of Western cities. Remember, they had the drug dens. In fact, that's what they're sitting in right now. The first drug control ordinance in U.S. history were issued in San Francisco in an attempt to stop the spread of opium dens, where the white clientele gladly visited with their $8. Unbelievable. Looked like a roach hotel, but moving on. Then, 1895, German pharmaceutical giant Bayer came out with a new wonder drug, more powerful than aspirin, that worked phenomenally well as a cough suppressant. Its name was Hiroshik. It was hero shit. Meaning strong, heroic. But in the United States, it was marketed under a different brand named heroin. I like hero shit better. I'm calling heroin hero shit. Hero shit.
Along with cocaine, it was recommended as safe alternative to morphine for addicts trying to shake their dependency and flooded the markets in many forms, tinctures, pills, even heroin, throat lozenges. These people are such junkies, man. So they had liquid form, pill form, and a throat lozenger. They're all loaded with with heroin. It possessed many advantages over morphine. The Boston Medical and Surgical Journal wrote in 1900 advancing claims with a chilling similarity to early advertisements for OxyContin. It's not hypnotic, and there's no danger of acquiring a habit. You don't have nothing on the streets now but a bunch of habit forming drugs, and this is why those addicts have grown over 20 years to 23 million in America. No danger of acquiring a habit. Yeah, yeah, right. The first drug kingpins. Around that time, the specter of the junkie and dope fiend began to appear as a stigmatized character in lurid newspaper accounts. The early 20th century was also a period of racial anxiety and growing hostility towards migrants. And didn't Trump just put another travel ban in effect? Still showing all that anxiety and hostility towards immigrants. Ladies and gentlemen, some things never change. Some things never change. Change is not what they can handle. That's why they're going to be crying on their way out. In their push for narcotics, crackdowns, crusaders like Wright and the Opium Commission played to fears that opium smoking white women would end up trading drugs for sex with Asian men. No, see, that's where your woman is a willing participant. They just don't want to believe their women will sleep with any man on this planet and don't give a damn. Don't want to believe it. The temperance movement wasn't just alcohol. It was also drugs that were ruining the moral temperament of Americans, said Lloyd Setterer, the chief medical officer of the New York Office of Mental Health and the author of a forthcoming book about the current opioid crisis. Again, Black people were sharecropping and on prison farms over vagrancy and laughing out loud in public. Our women were domestic workers and they were getting high. The US government began taxing opium in 1890, and the passage of the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 forced manufacturers to disclose the content of their products, so consumers wary of the drug would know if it was lurking in their kids' cough syrup or not. You see them passing all kinds of legislation and, about the drug plague that's going on. And you can see they were doing the same thing back then. These people are like a broken record in history. 3 years later, Congress passed the Opium Exclusion Act, banning its import for the purpose of smoking. Okay, so it was okay to do as long as you weren't smoking it. People are silly. No wonder why you got a drug problem in 2017.
Roosevelt sent Wright to lead an American delegation for the First International Opium Commission in Shanghai in 1909 and another gathering at The Hague in 1912 that produced the first global attempt to regulate narcotics. And I guess these were your people that were there at the conference. No wonder why you still got a drug problem. Wright continued to push for U.S. legislation over the objections of drug manufacturers, an effort that culminating the Harris Narcotic Act, Tax Act of 1914. It taxed and tightly regulated the sale and distribution of opium and cocaine-based products, the first broad crackdown in a century of American narcotics prohibition. Opiates remained available for short-term medical use. Isn't that what they're now saying? The doctors are trying to prescribe opioids only for 5 days now. Ain't working. But not to maintain addiction, and thousands of doctors and pharmacists were arrested under the Harrison laws, according to Cabrera. A younger generation of physicians viewed opiates far more warily, issuing fewer prescriptions, said Courtwright, and made crucial differences in the prevention of new addicts. Isn't that what they're doing now? See, these people, they can't change for shit. You can see why their society is failing when it comes down to the drugs. They struggled with drugs in the past. They're struggling with drugs now. Oh, let's move on. Prohibition era gangsters like Arnold Rothstein, who trafficked in illegal heroin, would become the country's first drug kingpins in the 1920s, but the number of opiate addicts, Americans, would never be as large again until now. At the peak of the 19th century addiction crisis, roughly 300,000 Americans were probably hooked, according to Courtwright, despite higher estimates by Wright and other activists that were probably inflated. See, they couldn't get an accurate number then, and they can't get one now. Some things never change, ladies and gentlemen. You can count on these people never, ever changing. Today, the United States have 4 times as many people, but perhaps 10 times as many addicts. Stop overdoses, carry naloxone. You seriously put this billboard up? Oh my God. It's a billboard in Ohio. Moreover, 21st century dope, especially heroin, spiked with synthetic opioids like fentanyl, is more addictive than anything before, according to narcotics experts. The highs are higher. Isn't that what they like? As are the risk of lethal overdose. U.S. law enforcement agents have never had to confront criminal networks as sophisticated and well-financed as the drug traffickers who dominate narcotic distribution today. And the flow of American opioid continue over and under the counter. While new prescriptions for opioid-based drugs peaked in 2011 and have declined slightly, prescribing levels in 2015 were still 3 times that of 1999. The latest figures show dependent Americans who can no longer get the drugs from pharmacies are turning to illegal markets in greater numbers than ever before, or they're just holding up the pharmacy altogether or anywhere that got drugs. That is the biggest difference between the 19th century crisis and the contemporary one, said Dr. DuPont, the former White House drug czar, who helped develop the first methadone maintenance program in the 1970s to treat heroin addiction. So treat drugs with drugs. Ladies and gentlemen, this drug plague ain't going nowhere. These high IQ people never fail to amaze me. Let's move on. Both plagues began with over-the-counter prescription of pain medication. Today, illegal traffickers are far more able to step in as the government cracks down. The sea change is the illegal market, DuPont said. The move towards synthetic opioids like fentanyl will make everything much harder. The dogs can't sniff it. You can send it through the mail. It's very scary. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what this proves? It proves that America has never conquered a drug problem since she's been colonized. Okay? They had an inability to stop drugs then, and they have an inability to stop drugs now, but these are the ones with the high IQs. They are the ones that know everything. They are the ones that got everything. Even when you give them all kinds of advantages, they still can't overcome a drug addiction. Those same opioids are prescribed to Black people, but since doctors believe we don't feel pain, we didn't get hooked on it like white people did. So, ladies and gentlemen, drug fiends of yesterday are the drug fiends of today. Please tell me what you think about this great white bread American history, y'all. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. When it comes down to this opioid plague, price gouging is just through the roof. They jacked up the price of the Narcan, and now just to transport a dead body now costs a lot of money. Let's get into this article that came out on BBC News, September 28th, 2017. Opioid crisis. More transport costs double in West Virginia. All right. The state paid nearly $900,000 in 2017 to transport corpses, more than double the cost in the last 2 years, officials say. The number of body transports jumped from 2,200 in the fiscal year 2015 to about 4,200 during the same period in 2017. Trump has created a commission to study the plague. He has called addiction to opioids a class of drug covering everything from heroin to legal painkillers, a serious problem that likes of which we have never seen, and we haven't. I mean, this thing is through the roof. U.S. First Lady Melania Trump hosted a discussion about the crisis on Thursday. All right, I'm going to play this video.
That's an overdose.
You're just a business. If you've been able to have record profits, then invest in healing people injured by your product. People are dropping like flies, and it makes no difference what their economic status is. They could be wealthy, they could be mired in poverty. This scourge takes no prisoners.
My name is Brandon Adkins, and I work at the Huntington Police Department. When I first started with my job and I started seeing it, I had a little bit of excitement into it because it was something new to me. And it didn't take long. I've got a year and a half on now, and I'm just completely jaded about it. It just seems like each case, it's just the same old. What's going on? You got needles?
No
needles?
like that.
Not today?
I swear I struggled right there. I was just
You snort it?
Yeah.
In a 10-day span, I think we had like 14 deaths. So I ended up having to take a few days off just to kind of regroup myself and not just be unhappy all the time. What they'll do is they'll put the product in here, a little bit of water, heat it up, put a cotton filter in, draw out the filter.
It started with the pills. I had a motorcycle wreck and started with the doctor first.
And what kind of dosage was he giving you, and how often and all that?
It was Roxy 15, 2 a day. Then started overdoing it.
Steve Williams, mayor of the city of Huntington, West Virginia. Most of the heroin addiction that we have began with individuals who had a prescription with some pain medication, and that prescription led to an addiction. Huntington is a town of just under 50,000 people. Our county is 96,000 people. Yet over a five-year period, just a 5-year period, there was over 40 million doses of opiates that were distributed in this county alone. I don't need to get in and don't even seek to get into what the motivation was. The numbers speak for themselves.
My name's Brian Scott Littlejohn. I've been using since I was 10 years old. I've been clean since September 28th, 2015. We'd go see the doctor, get prescription pills, come back. Like it was easily accessible. They kind of, if you just show up down there and say, hey, I have a back injury, they'll pretty much prescribe you whatever you wanted.
Let's take a couple cleansing breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth.
You go to the doctor, you pay them cash, no insurance, and then leave the doctor's office, go straight to the pharmacy. They fill a prescription, no questions asked, and you're free to go.
Rather than going to the taxpayers of my community and saying, we need to raise your taxes so that we can fight this epidemic, we need to go to those who are complicit in causing the epidemic, and they need to be held accountable. If you've been able to have record profits, then invest in healing people that have found themselves injured by your product.
My name is Michael Smith. I'm a lieutenant in the Huntington Fire Department here in Huntington, West Virginia. Most of our call-outs now are for drugs. They probably make up somewhere around a third of our calls. Fires generally are about 15% to 10% of our calls. So obviously the drugs are much more. Sorry about that. That's me. That's me. That's an overdose. Come on, We're responding to an overdose of a middle-aged male in a local grocery store. He's been reported to 911, and we're currently there now. Amanda was called restroom. Thank you. It's the second one we've had in here. What we got? His mom is supposedly outside. Hey. I think she talked to us before we come in. What's his name? What's his name? Timmy. Hey, look here. Just lay there.
How long have you been doing heroin?
It's been a while since you've done it.
Done it, or you've been doing it for a while? Yeah. Did you overdose? Were you breathing? Yep. Maybe about 6 times a minute. Normal's 20. All right. Let's go ahead and stand up here. We're going to sit up here against the wall. Get your bearings.
Can I just ask, did you start on opioids first before moving on to heroin?
Yes, sir.
And how did you get into it?
I was on pain pills, and actually I've been trying to get off since. Hopefully.
Yep. You got to check. They TC. So you want to go to the hospital?
I would just as soon be able to hear from these companies that say, we'll come in and we'll partner with you to be able to fight this addiction, rather than spend their time saying, if it's not our fault, we're just a business. When I was in the investment business, if I was giving advice to somebody that caused harm to them, I would lose my career, lose my license, and possibly have to pay money. Do no harm. And there's plenty of harm that we can point to all around.
Okay. Boy, I tell you, you see the way some of these people are living when they're junkies? They're living in squalor. Damn. Okay. West Virginia public health officials believe the increase in caseload at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner is a result of overdose deaths. Toby D. Wagner, a public health spokesman, told the BBC, the Appalachian state saw an estimate of 880 people die of drug overdoses last year, the highest death rate across the country, according to a report by the Charleston Gazette Mail newspaper. It's just another expense going towards the drug plague that our state and our nation is under the grips of. Dr. Ruhal Gupta, West Virginia Public Health Commissioner told the BBC. This particular cost is just the tip of the iceberg to indicate the cost that Americans, certainly West Virginians, are bearing from cradle to grave. It's touching every fabric of our society. He added, the state is grappling with a host of drug overdose related costs, including a backlog on postmortem examinations, as well as babies who are born drug dependent. Earlier this year, West Virginia lawmakers approved $500,000 in extra funds to pay for soaring body transport costs. Licensed embalmer Jim Laurie told the Charleston Gazette-Mail he came out of retirement 3 years ago to help Charleston mortuary services handle the influx of bodies. Wow, he had to come out of retirement? Mr. Laurie said it was not uncommon to send up 2 or 3 people who died from a drug overdose to a morgue each day. About 124 deaths each day in the U.S. are due to drug overdoses, the equivalent of September 11th, every 3 weeks, according to the Trump administration. And in 2016, they're estimating about 64,000 deaths, but we'll know the true number around December. The plague started with legally prescribed painkillers like Percocet and OxyContin. It intensified as these were diverted to the black market. There has also been a sharp rise in the use of illegal opioids, including heroin. Many street drugs are laced with powerful opioids like fentanyl, increasing the risk of overdose. The use of injectable opioids has contributed to hepatitis C cases doubling. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will leave the link to this article in the description box. And then you can come out here and look at it at your own leisure. But this just go to show you how not only is the epidemic not going away, it's now taking toll on states financially, trying to keep up with all of the 911 calls and transporting dead bodies and using up Narcan. I'm telling you, this, and I will say it again, I believe is the one thing that's going to break America. It's too many people on the drug. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, ladies and gentlemen, please do. Peace, family. This is an article that came out in the Cannabis, and this is really going over how bad it is in the U.S. as far as morgue room is concerned. How bad is the opioid crisis? Morgues are literally out of room. Wow. But we know this has been going on for a while. But this go to show you how strong this plague is still going in the U.S. One by one, on a single day earlier this month, coroners from 8 counties contacted the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's crime lab. Each had opened a death case that required an autopsy, and each was told to call back the next day. There were no available tables, they were told. It's a response that isn't unusual. Several times on any given week, coroners have been told there's no room at any of the state's forensic labs until other bodies are released. The backlog has sometimes left local officials who rely on the state facilities scrambling to find ways to store bodies. Wow. Ooh, man. Meanwhile, anxious family members must delay funerals, burials, and cremations. Hope Officials hope the measure on the lab will lessen when a new, larger 6.68 million morgue, 17,511 square feet opens in November. Wow, they got to open bigger facilities for all the bodies that are coming in from drug overdose. Expanded intake and body storage areas at the Decanter site opened last week, but others caution the backlog could continue, fueled by a surge in opioid overdose deaths, a rising number of suicides, and Georgia's growing population. Wow. So they're saying they're getting a high number of overdose deaths and suicides coming in at the same time. Oh, man. Oh man, that is crazy. Uh, it's tough. Catoosa County Coroner Vanita Hollinger said about the delays. These families have given up someone. Their whole world is upside down, and they can't even start their grieving. Hollinger said she has waited as long as 5 days before there was room at the morgue at GBI's Division of Forensic Science in Decanter, a 2.5-hour drive away. Recently, she alerted the medical examiner. There had been 2 deaths on the same day. The morgue could only take 1 body, and the second one could be delivered the next day, she said. Fewer autopsies. Autopsies are required in some states, like in obvious homicides when a child dies, or if illicit or prescription drugs are suspected in a death. While Fulton, Cobb, DeKalb, and Gwinnett counties have their own medical examiners and handle their own autopsies, the 155 remaining counties rely on the GBI's 15 pathologists and 3 morgues: Rockdale, Hall, Barrow, and Henry counties sometimes turn to DeKalb County for their autopsies. Wow. This is crazy, but this is America's reality now. This is a daily reality in America. Prior to the opening of the new cooler, there was often not enough space to accept bodies until others were released. Coroners would have to hold the bodies until notified when space became available. Wow. Until there's an autopsy, there can be no funeral. It's common for us to hold them, Richmond County Coroner Mark Bowden said of bodies that have to be stored for a day or for days because of the frequent lack of space at any of the state's 3 morgues. Boy, I couldn't do that job. I seriously, I could not do this job. I could not look at massive amounts of bodies coming in every day, and they're either suicides or drug overdoses. Hollinger called some of the changes alarming and arguing, for instance, that those over age 55 shouldn't automatically be disqualified from autopsies as the new changes require. The rise in overdose deaths has increased the workload for pathologists. Okay, so I guess if you're over 55, they don't even want to autopsy you. It's probably, they're overwhelmed, so I get it. They have been increasing steadily since 2013 to 776 last year, according to GBI statistics. So far in 2017, a quarter of all overdose deaths have been attributed to fentanyl, a powerful synthetic opioid. The whole process sucks. According to GBI, there are a total of 26 full-time forensic pathologists working for the state and in the 4 metro Atlanta counties that have their own medical examiners. That is well below what is recommended for a state of its size. As a general guideline, there should be 1 full-time forensic pathologist per 200,000 population. The GBI wrote in a report to the governor asking for funds for more staff for the morgue based on Georgia's population of approximately 10 million. Georgia needs nearly twice the number of forensic pathologists as the currently working in the state. Last year, each of the medical examiners performed 325 to 350 autopsies, a total of 3,609 autopsies. So far this year, the lab has performed 2,657 autopsies. Meanwhile, the national standard is 250 autopsies per pathologist. Wow. I mean, where do you keep getting all this funding from? That's what I'm talking about. You know, like I said, we are looking at what's going to bring America down. Seriously. We're looking at exactly what's going to bring it down. On August 27, Bates called to request an autopsy, but there was not an autopsy table available until August 29th, which meant uncertainty in that family's funeral planning. That was not bad. It has certainly gotten better since the first of the year, said Bates, who stores body at the local hospital until the state's crime lab has room. This year, the state legislator have the GBI money to hire 5 additional part-time morgue staff, as well as give pay raises to pathologists to make the crime lab more competitive with Georgia's counties and other states and hospitals in hiring. The lab can now pay a starting board-certified pathologist $195,851 a year. Hey, y'all, we need to become pathologists in the Black community, which is more than the GBI director's salary, but less than other states. The chair of the Augusta University Pathology Department makes almost $429,000, and an associate there makes more than $218,000. I think our new morgue will hold us 10 years, said GBI Director Vernon Keenan. What we'll need is more doctors. A lot of times doctors will also do work at the morgue, and these are sometimes doctors that you're looking at, in a family practice or at a hospital, and they also will do work at the morgue. I do know that from talking to a few doctors before in the past. Contributing to the morgue backlog is one persistent problem, remains that either remain unidentified or otherwise in limbo. The number of identified bodies at a morgue changes day by day. On September 13th, there were 33, including the body of a 66-year-old woman that had been there since November 27th, 2015. Her relatives cannot agree on burial arrangements. Wow. You can't agree on burial arrangements, so you leave your loved one freezing there all that time? That's disgusting. The body of a 60-year-old woman who died of natural causes in Clayton County has been stored at the morgue in Decatur since November 27th, 2015, because the GBI and local authorities cannot locate her relatives. A recently located friend has offered to pay for a funeral. At the same time, the morgue is storing 277 unidentified remains. At least one set of skeletal remains date back to 1969. Oh my God. We're working to have them buried, but we have to have the authority to do it or get a court order, Keenan said. It's time to bury the unidentified. 1969? Yeah, you should have been put that damn thing in the ground. I mean, oh my God, a set of skeletal remains since 1969? That's outrageous to keep something like that in the morgue for this long. Wow. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I will leave the link to this article in the description box. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is an article that just came out in the Metro co.uk. Here's why the U.S. opioid plague is so much worse than you think. It's an article that came out September 27th, 2017. The drugs are linked to nearly 150 fatality overdoses across the states every day. That means the country is enduring a death toll equal to a September 11th attacks every 3 weeks. That's outrageous. The plague claimed around 33,000 lives in 2015, according to the most recent figures. What makes this mess so alarming is how far-reaching it is. There isn't a neighborhood, city, or community in the United States that has not been either directly or indirectly impacted by the opioid plague. Angelo Valenti, Executive Director at Partnership for a Drug-Free New Jersey, told Metro US. What is also very unique about this plague is it equally impacts families of all social, economic, religious, and geographical backgrounds. The severity of the plague is enormous. It is infesting every crevice of society because of the way opioids have been made so easily available to us. All right. You can see them moving a body in a morgue. Wow. And look like he's doing a CT scan on a body. Addiction starts in the doctor's office and ends on the streets. Opioid use has increased sharply over the past few decades, and the surge can be thanked in part to the medical community. Physicians upgraded their reliance on them in the 1980s when they believed opioids like OxyContin, Percocet, and Vicodin were an effective and non-addictive means of treating chronic and acute pain. The number of opioid prescriptions rose rapidly in the following years, and the opioid sales nearly quadrupled from 1999 to 2014, according to the Centers for Disease Control. But it has now been established that these medications do indeed contain qualities that are addictive. All of the above opioids are prescribed by doctors and dentists to their patients to treat things like a persistent toothache, for example. And that's the danger because these drugs are handed out by professionals. We think they're safe, but that's far from the case. Some similar feelings to a high, an heroin high, and the same type of dependency. All right. People of all ages are prescribed, and in many cases, overprescribed opioids can lead to dependency, continued Angelo. And we know whites are definitely overprescribed the opioids because, you go by the racist belief that black people don't feel pain. But I want to thank you for believing that because you really spared us in this drug epidemic. And I really do appreciate that. Those dependent on prescribed opioids often turn to heroin, which has a similar chemical composition and is much less expensive. The chemical formulas of prescription painkillers and heroin are nearly identical and produce similar effects and are as addictive. Heroin, although is illegal, is extremely inexpensive and accessible. The plague is no more visible than in New Jersey, where around 2,000 deaths were linked to opioid overdose in 2016. Angelo said the state has some of the purest and most accessible heroin in the country. New Jersey is currently enduring a rise in the distribution of fentanyl, a pain medication that is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. There were 46 fentanyl related deaths in New Jersey in 2013, according to the New Jersey Advanced Media. This climbed to 800 in 2016. All right. So, what's being done to combat the opioid crisis? The government has taken steps to fight the epidemic in a number of ways. Well, they must be invisible because I don't see anything and I don't see any articles on what they're doing. Recent legislation signed into law in New Jersey, for example, limits initial opioid prescriptions to a 5-day supply. That's not gonna, never mind. It's also required doctors and dentists, when prescribing opioids to a patient, to have a conversation with them about the addictive nature of these painkillers and whether there are non opioid alternatives. Nationally, the President's Commission to Combating Drug Addiction and the Opioid Plague is examining ways to better address the plague. On one more local level, many police departments are offering to help those struggling with addiction, with some providing walk in hours for those seeking help. All right, so this is pretty much it. This is a really bad situation going on in the US. And as long as the addiction is out there, then the drugs will be there too. So I know they're cutting the doctors back on writing the prescriptions, but if you haven't done anything on the street level, then what are they really blocking? I mean, it's the street drugs are easy to come by, very easy. So ladies and gentlemen, as I stated before, this drug plague ain't going nowhere. It is here to stay. It's just too many millions of people on the drug right now, and nothing concrete is really being done from the Trump's commission made recommendations, but nothing is really being done to make any difference right now. I mean, this whole thing is imploding on America right now. And I already did an article a few days ago talking about how much money this is killing America economically, trying to deal with this drug plague that's going on. And in my opinion, this is the one thing that will bring America down, is this drug plague and their inability to stop it. And expect no changes. Please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family.
All right, this story just came out September 26, 2017 on News 12 Connecticut. And the deaths from drug overdose continue to increase, as well as across the country. But this particular article is about Connecticut. Reports show increase in drug overdose deaths in Connecticut. Let's go ahead and listen to the video.
The healthcare issue, opioid addiction, now the #1 cause of accidental death in Connecticut and elsewhere. A recovering addict from New Canaan and local experts we spoke with today say it's a tough addiction to beat, but it's doable. Here's News 12's Gillian Neff.
Percocet and Vicodin for an ACL surgery on my knee.
Dave Fleming of New Canaan says even though he had a history of alcohol addiction, he thought he could control how many pain pills he was taking until he was taking up to 10 a day, not just for the high, but to avoid the low.
The opioid addiction, you become physically addicted, and where you need that, and if you don't take the pill, it's like having the flu 10 times over.
Today, Fleming is anxious to help others find their way out of addiction.
The first step, which is the hardest step, is to ask for help.
Silver Hill Hospital's Dr. Eric Collins says after just 2 weeks of taking opioids, you can experience withdrawal symptoms when you try to stop.
These drugs hijack the system, release a lot more dopamine.
He says once you're at that point, detox is key.
They can get treated in the hospital for 4 to 8 days.
He says a doctor will likely prescribe medication to help wean you off the drug or to stop the opioid from working. He says during this time, counseling and support groups can lift you up. New Canaan-based drug and alcohol counselor Gerard Vasco says he sees how Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous make a difference.
They envelop you and they carry you, and they say in AA that they will love you until you can learn to love yourself. And it's not cliche.
As for Dave Fleming, he's now involved in a family support group in New Canaan. Started a year ago, they now have 30 families involved. Their main priority to help young people who are falling into addiction.
You can get better, and your life can be incredible.
It's been years for you.
Yes, it has been.
How many years?
It's been almost 15 years.
In New Canaan, Gillian Neff, News 12 Connecticut.
The New Canaan parent support group that Fleming is involved with was started by another New Canaan resident, Paul Reinhardt, who lost his son to drug addiction. The group meets every Thursday evening. We have a link to that support group and to Silver Hill Hospital on news12.com.
Oh, well, as you can see, and the beat goes on and on and on, right? So this New Canaan had, according to statistics, 917 people die from drug overdoses in Connecticut in 2016. And like most places, they are expecting that number to increase at the end of 2017. So this battle is on, it's real, and there is no end in sight. I was even looking at a few articles how opioids and heroin is flourishing all through Ireland and in places overseas. So this is really a global thing. It really truly is. But it just happens that the US leads in all of these deaths, where it's not quite as bad in other countries. But nevertheless, you can see no end in sight. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here's another article that came out in the Digital Journal. This is an op-ed piece. Inaction on the opioid crisis is killing people and our economy. How many people need to die before we realize federal and state governments have not been doing much to help stem what has become an epidemic that is now affecting our economy, job growth, and legal system. Drug overdose deaths and opioid-related deaths continue to increase in the United States. The majority of drug overdose deaths, more than 6 out of 10, involve an opioid, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. Statistics now show 91, actually it's 142 people dying every day from opioid overdose, with 64,000 fatal overdose expected this year. The number of deaths is even having an impact on employment and businesses. And a new problem has reared its ugly head in the economic impact the crisis is having on small town finances in many states. Even coroners and medical examiner offices are feeling the effects of the opioid crisis. Federal action has not done much. It has been 6 months since Trump signed an executive order creating a commission to combat the opioid plague. Then on August 10th, he described the plague as a national emergency. Trump has not yet made an official national emergency declaration because such a move would give states access to federal funds to fight it. And that's the thing, he don't want them to have it. And see, personally, I think Trump is going to go completely silent. And that declaration will never be signed. But we'll see. Actually, according to The Intercept, there is no such evidence that Trump administration has moved on nearly any of his drug commission's recommendation. He hasn't. It has gotten so bad around the country that not only are morgues overcrowded, but so are jails and courtrooms. In fact, counties and cities are facing higher costs in emergency call volumes. And we know that's true. But let's add a little bit to those emergency calls. In Indiana County, Pennsylvania, a predominantly rural, mountainous region of the state, autopsy and toxicology costs have nearly doubled in 6 years, from about $89,000 in 2010 to $165,000 in 2016, county data shows. Mike Baker, the county's top government official, says that because of the soaring costs of prosecuting opioid-related crimes and providing the accused with a public defender. The county is using contingency funds to pay for the added costs. Naloxone, the one drug capable of reversing an overdose, has become almost too costly to purchase. Wow. Wow. Adding another problem for emergency responders to cope with. Evzio? Oh, okay, I know what that is. That's the auto-injector of the naloxone. I know what that is. Similar in function to the EpiPen, rose from $690 in 2014 to $4,500. Oh my, woo! You talk about your price gouging for the Narcan. That is some serious price gouging. 2014, this way, 3 years ago, in 3 years, it went from $690 to $4,500 for Narcan. Oh, man. Woo, he ain't lying. They would go broke. And you got to think about all the doses you got to hit these people with, because they require a lot more if they got fentanyl in their system. Other formulation of naloxone have also seen similar increases in price. Medical examiners feeling the effects of the plague. According to the Vice, the National Association of Medical Examiner mandates that every medical examiner in the roughly 70 accredited offices around the country perform no more than 250 autopsies a year. That's impossible if you have all the drug overdose deaths every single day, 142 a day, but I actually think it's more. I think they're undercutting the number. If a medical examiner's office goes over that number too many times, the office is placed on provisional accreditation until the number goes back down. And this has become a real problem for many medical examiner offices, where the number of autopsies have risen threefold or more over the past 2 years. New Hampshire medical examiners can't completely autopsy every body anymore. It's been getting too many. Wow. Well, I understand that. I'm surprised they're still autopsying these bodies, being that, you know that a lot of them are drug overdoses. Connecticut's office of the chief medical examiner did lose its full accreditation and was placed on provisional status this year. Chief Medical Examiner James Gill said the opioid crisis had tripled the number of bodies the office sees. We are at increased risk for making mistakes, and that can affect our credibility with families, with jurors, with attorneys, with judges, Gill said. The American economy is suffering because of the opioid crisis. Wow. Didn't they say for years that Black people were dragging down the economy with welfare and all that stuff? You see what liars these people are? Their junkies are the ones dragging down the economy. And that makes sense. It makes sense because there's so many. Just the other day, 23 million people are addicts in America? So it would make sense they would be the drag. You let one of them bring up some food stamps and welfare to me again. Boy, I'm going to really unload this on them. A Goldman Sachs report in July, the opioid crisis was initially fueled by the misuse of prescription opioids, but the spike in overdose deaths in the last 5 years have come from heroin and illicit fentanyl users, most of whom previously used prescription opioids, but switched to these cheaper, more accessible drugs. And recent reports, including one from the Federal Reserve Chair, Janet Yellen, point to prime age men in particular falling out of the workforce due to addiction with opioids. There are 6 million jobs available in the US right now, yet there are also 20 million people in the US addicted to narcotics, including opioids. That is outrageous. You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? 20 million people in America are addicted to opioids. Woo! Y'all come back and talk about some welfare and food stamps again. You just try it. The failures of the federal government are stalling help the states. Okay, let's look at the president's opioid commission first. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who chairs the commission, backs Trump's commitment to declare an emergency, but Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders would only call the declaration an involved process. You know what? They're stalling. I'm telling you, he is not signing this declaration because that would take millions and millions of dollars out of their budget, billions actually, billions out of their budget to then provide to all these states because of these junkies. And Trump already said he's not interested in helping people with treatment. If he unleashed this money, he wants the fight to be on the street drugs that are out there, which he ain't going to win. I can tell you that right now. That's another way of pouring your money down the drain. Okay, let's get back into the article. The commission has a final report due on October 1st, but Christie has already asked for a month extension. In all fairness, the only progress made on Trump's opioid policy in the last month has been the announcement of an already existing partnership between the government and the pharmaceutical industry to research and generate non-opioid pain medication and additional medication-assisted treatment options. Things have gotten so bad on September 19th, 51 House Democrats led by Representative Elijah Cummings, Democrat, Maryland, sent a letter to the president urging the administration to declare a national emergency and act on one critical recommendation, ensuring that naloxone, a drug used to reverse the effects of an opioid overdose, gets into the hands of every law enforcement officer in the United States. Wow. Do you remember them making recommendations for them to do this for crack addicts? Oh boy. All right. But looking at all the problems and lack of any solution so far, it seems clear that by not officially declaring the opioid crisis a national emergency, the Trump administration has effectively kept federal monies out of the hands of the state, and he's going to continue to do that. His inaction, coupled with his lack of understanding of the drug crisis, has not only caused a deterioration of our healthcare system, but impact our judiciary system and our economy. So the biggest drag on the American economy, ladies and gentlemen, are your opioid, heroin, and fentanyl addicts out here. They are draining the resources. They are draining the system with all of their 911 phone calls. They're draining all of the money from the states around the country. And they are literally dragging down the entire economy. Tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. The other day, I did a video on the opioid plague that's in the country, and it was estimating that 23 million people in the US are currently abusing drugs. That is absolutely outrageous. If you have that amount of drug addicts in your country, there is no way you are going to ever get this thing under control, especially treating it as a public health issue. But it's amazing. This thing has ran nearly 20 years with no end in sight. And their continued approach to treat it as public health, when the crack addicts were all rounded up, and even family members that had nothing to do with crack were all thrown in jail. All of them. They took generations away, jailing people. And to this day, many of those people are still sitting in jail. Now, Obama did get some of them out at the end of his term, but the bottom line is there are still too many in there. Now America wants to change gear, and it's because of who's on these drugs. It's mostly white people. You know, they wouldn't be screaming public health and drug court and all that stuff if it were black people. They treated the black community totally different. Now, here's an article that just came out yesterday on Gizmodo, and I will leave the link to this article in the description box. It came out yesterday. Opioids are shaving months off U.S. life expectancy. And believe me, that's going to be increasing in no time. The United States has an opioid plague. Heroin overdose deaths rates have tripled since 2010, according to one report, and overall opioid overdose death rates have tripled since 2000. It's not going away. Absolutely, it sure isn't. Looking at how the opioid plague has affected U.S. life expectancy between 2000 and 2015. Scientists at the CDC learned that on average, drug poisoning deaths are accounting for an average loss of 0.21 years, around 2.5 months. The researchers came to their conclusion based on data from the National Vital Statistics System mortality file and factored these into calculations of the United States life expectancy in 2000 and 2015. Drug poisoning deaths increased from 17,415 in 2000 to 52,404 in 2015. And the drug poisoning death rate per 100,000 people increased from 6.2 to 16.2, mostly due to opioids. According to a new paper published yesterday in the Journal of the American Medical Association. If you haven't been following, American life expectancy is faltering. Last year, it was reported that life expectancy decreased for the first time since 1993. Our life expectancy is now lower than in most high-income countries, with this gap projected to increase, according to the paper. Sure, life expectancy is a false measure. A lot of its increase relies on infant mortality. Since high infant mortality is like averaging a bunch of zeros into a large number, lifespan, meanwhile, is probably maxed out at around 122. But a lot of scientists have debated whether or not that's true. But if infant mortality isn't increasing, then it's pretty clear other factors are in play. Factors that won't fix themselves. You can best believe this plague ain't going to fix itself. You can best believe it. Putting all that aside, though, if part of America's presumed greatness in its life expectancy, then we're certainly losing steam. And despite the opioid plague being potentially solvable problem, the president still has not officially declared it a national emergency. That's because he hasn't signed the declaration. Okay, he made the announcement that it would be a national emergency, and that was over a month ago. And he has not signed that declaration. And I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, he's not going to sign it. He's not going to sign that. He sees how much money is being poured into this drug plague, and it's not putting a dent in people just not using drugs in the country. It's going strong. And I think he don't want to pour more billions into this thing, and you still got a bunch of junkies around. This should make you mad. Actually, it don't. After all, the researchers write, preventing opioid-related poisoning deaths will be important to achieve more robust increases in life expectancy once again. Ain't gonna happen. Life expectancy is going to continue to shorten because there's no incentive for these people to get off of drugs as long as you're calling it a public health issue and you don't want to put anybody in jail. And it's really draining the economy with all of the emergency calls on a daily basis all throughout the country. You are pouring all kinds of money into Narcan. You're pouring all kinds of money into all these rehab centers, and it says 90% of these people fall off the wagon within the first week of getting out of rehab. So it's really counterproductive pouring so much into this thing and putting your all into something that you're not going to be able to stop. If these people have decided they want to be on drugs, then they're going to be on drugs no matter what you do or say. You know, drugs have destroyed family and destroyed lives, and the morgues all across this country are overflowing with these bodies of drug deaths. It is not black on black crime or even car accidents or any of those things that are putting people in morgues in high numbers. It's this drug plague. It is now the leading cause of death in the United States of America. Period. Now they're estimating 142 per day, and I'm telling you, if they're telling you 142, it's probably double or triple that amount. Ladies and gentlemen, they're never going to tell the real true numbers because they're embarrassed by this shit. Period. Please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family.
An article that just came out in the Pacific Standard, September 13th, 2017. What do Harvey and Irma mean for America's opioid emergency? President Trump's own addiction commission recommended last month that he declared opioid overdoses in America a national emergency. Trump said he would. Then Hurricane Harvey and Irma hit the United States and its territories, displacing tens of thousands of people and wreaking damage that groups have estimated to cost in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Department of Health and Human Services head Tom Price declared public health emergencies for the storms, while Trump declares states of emergency for 4 states, Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, in response to Irma. What does all this mean for the designation of drug use and addiction as an emergency in America? Trump never made that official declaration. So, in other words, he said he would make the opioid plague a national emergency. But as far as really signing it into a national emergency, he never did that. So far, he just verbalized it, but it has not really been made official at all. All right. The White House is working on doing so, a spokesman told USA Today. And that's very unusual, by the way. Whenever something is declared a national emergency, that declaration is usually signed immediately. Trump, it's been a month, and he still has not put his signature on that national emergency. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't think he will. I don't think he will. If he does, he's going to do it at a time where, and right now, it really ain't going to make a difference. They're not even putting a dent in this drug plague that's going on. And I think they waited too long. Had they done this maybe 10 or even 15 years ago, it might have made a difference. But yesterday, I read an article where 1.1 billion people worldwide are junkies. That's a lot of people on this earth to be addicted to drugs, over 1 billion people. That's like a whole nation. That's a whole nation right there. But that's crazy. But it's been a month. Usually, even when you declare a state of an emergency, those declarations are signed immediately so that funding can be provided to the states that need it. You know, like Florida and Texas. I never heard of a state of emergency and a month later, nothing is signed. So that means no funding can go out to help the plague as long as he doesn't sign the declaration, which Trump hasn't done. Why? I mean, he barely wanted to talk about this whole thing, if you really think about it. Okay, let's get back to the story here. What does all this mean for the designation of drug use and addiction as an emergency in America? Trump never made that official declaration. The White House is working on doing so, spokesman told USA Today, but it's apparently turned out to be a more difficult task than the administration thought. And you can see Sanders Young says making the opioid crisis a national emergency more involved than anticipated. I don't think he's going to do it. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I don't think he is. It's been a month. It don't take a month to sign something, a declaration. When the President's Commission on Combating Drug Addiction and the Opioid Crisis first recommended opioid overdoses to be considered a national emergency, Pacific Standard talked to University of Michigan health policy researcher Rebecca Haffajee to learn the benefits and drawbacks of such a declaration. She warned against keeping an emergency state on drugs open for too long. She argued that doing so could drain special funds, create a status quo in which health privacy laws are relaxed for an extended time, and undermine the point of emergency declarations, which is to respond to situations that need extraordinary power. Still, given the increasingly deadly heroin supply in some parts of the country, Hafaji said, I think the opioid plague has become more acute and it could be appropriate to see if Harvey and Irma alter the balance. We reach back out to Hafaji. She didn't change her mind. The hurricanes do, however, demonstrate the more traditional uses of emergency declarations and why they work so well for sudden severe problems such as storms and infectious disease outbreaks. The declarations have infused money and attention to those affected areas. They've suspended Medicare and Medicaid rules so doctors and nurses can care for beneficiaries without requiring them to show documentation first. That paperwork shouldn't hold up providing care, Hafaji says. These changes aren't sustainable over the years. It will take for the estimated 23 million Americans, listen to this. When have we heard that figure? Listen to this. I'm going to read that again. These changes aren't sustainable over the years. It will take for estimated 23 million Americans with addictions to recover, or even for the Gulf states and the Caribbeans to rebuild. 23 million Americans are now drug addicts at this point in time. Ladies and gentlemen, I said it before and I will say it again. This drug plague ain't going nowhere. It ain't going nowhere. It is just so far out of control, it can't be contained. It doesn't matter how much money they pour into this thing, it cannot be contained. And I see her point. Now, if you got an infectious disease that's spreading that can be containable, or, quite naturally, a natural disaster, you throw money at that. How do you throw tons of money at an addiction that doesn't go away? You will ultimately run out of money. You only have to build up Florida and Texas, and then you move on. Of course, more storms are going to come because it's inevitable, but this plague has been nonstop for nearly 20 years, which means if you declare it an emergency, that means there's got to be an endless supply of money constantly pouring on this thing. How can you sustain something like that? You can't. Not unless you want your country to go under. You really can't. And that's probably why he hasn't signed it. I think he probably thought of people probably told him this. And this is probably the big reason why he's holding back on signing it, because he knows the implications. You're going to have to pour endless amounts of money into these people that don't even want to get off of the drug. Wow, 23 million Americans addicted to drugs. 23 million. Wow. Wow. That's the first time I've seen that number, y'all. That's the first time I've seen it. That is no joke. As for when Trump ought to declare opioid overdoses an emergency, Hafaji thinks it might be valuable to wait a few weeks so our focus can shift a bit, because that's a big purpose of the powers is to get lawmakers and public attention. And right now, I think we're at capacity. They're not stamping out this thing with this amount of people on drugs. It ain't going nowhere. It ain't going nowhere. I read actually an article when I first started doing videos that there were 90 million, you know, but I haven't seen that figure since. But then again, you know, America has a lot to hide. They really do. And, you know, this is a country that cares more about vanity and appearance than taking an issue head on and resolving it. They're not going to resolve this drug plague no more than they will resolve racism in America. I can tell you that right now. It ain't going nowhere. America is, like I said, when it comes down to social issues, America gets an F. America has done very poorly from resolving issues from within. And that has been going on for centuries. If you can't resolve those issues, you're not going to resolve a drug plague that has reached out to millions and millions of people in this country. You're not resolving that. America just don't resolve things like that. And drugs is just as much as crime and you know, and it's also a plague, and it also is dragging down the entire infrastructure in America. You know, you got all of these drug addicts that nobody even wants to employ. Nobody wants them. And you have a group of people that want to be different with them than they were with the crack addicts. You know, and just for that reason alone, you ain't going to resolve this thing. Okay, you're just not. How do you love somebody out of an addiction? It doesn't work that way. Drug addiction breaks up families. It always has in America. America just don't do well when it comes down to dealing with its people, and anything that is plaguing the country. You can't resolve racism. You can't resolve the suicide rate or the disparities. America just socially just does very poorly. It's a very poor country when it comes down to social issues. So how are they going to resolve a drug plague and you do so poorly in all the other areas? I guess your high IQ is just not telling you that. Hurricane Harvey and Irma will be resolved long before this drug plague ever will see anywhere close to being resolved. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. And if you can donate even $2 to my hurricane fund, I will deeply appreciate it. Peace, family. This is an article that came out in Blavity, and I will leave the link to this article in the description box. How race and class changed the perception of America's drug addiction. The media has finally been paying attention to the ongoing opioid and heroin abuse plague that seems to be a silent matter until demographics change everything. It seems that those who were initially affected by drug addiction had no social or racial resemblance to the politicians and health experts who could help the situation. It went undetected by regulators and law enforcement officials until evidence of the carnage it was causing began piling up to their feet, stated the Working Class Perspective blog. There are now widespread reports of a lot of coverage on opioid and heroin crisis. The president has even put a task force to combat the plague, and many addicts are being treated under the scope that opioid addiction is a disease. Yeah, crack addiction is not a disease. Back in the 90s, that wasn't a disease. You deserve to go to jail, but nobody deserves to go to jail. And let's pat them on the head and say it's a disease. It's a disease. Devils, man. Hospitalization seems to be the choice of treatment, even though incarceration was the only option that minorities had when they are impacted by drug addiction. That's right, because black drug addicts still go to jail, even to this day. But they claim everything is a public health issue. Now, what they mean is only for them. One of the most widely discussed reports came from economists Ann Case and Angus Deaton on working class, who identified that rising death rates among middle-aged whites, especially those from the working class, were tied in part to overdoses. These type of reports changed everything. What does all this mean? Well, these demographics and deaths of people who were not minorities seem to create a sense of urgency in America, and they're still dropping like flies. St. Louis based and acclaimed director Anthony Monahan was ahead of the media trend reporting on opioid and drug addiction. The he documented the plight of working class Americans suffering from addiction for the past 3 years. Monahan captured what he believes was America's apathy towards the working class and those who feel as if they have been left behind in this film, Rednecks in Clutches. Woo! I guess we'll watch the video.
Hi, my name is Tony Monaghan. I'm a culture. Come from a really poor family, come from one of 11 kids. Never really got much education. I own a business here now called Irish Construction in St. Louis, Missouri.
Well, the Irish way, they tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly to your face, whether you want to hear it or not.
I found a different breed of people here in construction than I have worked with before on my adventures.
It's because we're being open and honest.
Yeah, I mean,
putting all the chips on the table,
no,
right?
not everything on the table.
But is it wise to always put all your chips on the table?
Heaven won't take me no different. I'll take over because you know what? I'm gonna kick some motherfucking ass before I die.
The guys he's got, you know, it's been quite funny and it's been a real eye opener for me.
I thought it was cops that was after him. Oh, he said it's aliens. He said they came back to get me.
Like I'm the Jesus of masonry, you know what I mean? He just kind of gives you the psychopath glare.
I killed him. I killed a man.
I haven't seen guys like the guys I've seen here. Honestly, haven't they?
Tom, when I woke up, came on my death. He's like, you need to stop smoking crack.
Yeah. And did you believe him?
No.
They're all addicted to something. Drugs, heroin, meth, crack. 16 years old, I was shooting cocaine.
I don't know how my dad does it. He makes it work.
They seem to have a lot of good things about them. Like a lot of them have got compassion once you get to know them, and they really want to be your friend.
Yet in all those big cities, no place have I seen like the road by the river that flows through Raheen.
Rednecks and Colchies, huh? Okay. Whatever. All right. So it just sounds like to me it's just a bunch of Irish that are talking about their drug addiction in a documentary. So let's move on. Let's be honest, the opioid and heroin plague is no different than the crack epidemic. Actually, it is. It's a lot bigger. What's different is that white people are affected. Very true. And that's the only reason why it's getting treated as a public health issue. You can rest assured if this same exact thing was happening to the black population, it would be mass incarceration all over again. The new face of drug addiction is not a black and a Hispanic issue. This approach is different. And I can say this as a white man, this is a white man from Ireland that lives in the US. My perspective is, and an immigrant is different than the average American who may be blinded by privilege and the way they have been conditioned to think. Now, this, when we say they have privileges, they think we're just whining. I have bad news for you, white America. Everybody on the planet knows you have privileges. I don't believe there's anybody alive on earth at this time that don't know you have privileges. But every time black people bring it up, they're trying to come at us as if there's no history of this in the past. There's centuries and centuries of history on your white privilege all the way up to present day, where we see all of you getting off in court when you really should be in jail. We see this. And see, this just go to show you the immigrants see it too. But if black people say something about white privilege, what do you mean white privilege? There is no white privilege. Shut up. Shut the hell up. There is tons and tons of history going back all the way to the 16, 17, 18, 19, 2000, and all the way up to this damn decade. Okay, you're not fooling nobody with your dumb arguments. I guess that's your high IQ at work. Okay, let's move on. When I first did my documentary, no media even wanted to accept this depiction of working class chaos and drug addiction. Somehow, I think there is narrative that is pushed in which non-minorities must always be perceived in the best light, leading to very untrue stereotypes and making working class and poor minorities invisible in the American landscape. This is so true. This is so true. And we see this every day in the media. When it's black people, they want to plaster the negative coverage every day in news cycles over and over again. When white people do things wrong, they go silent. I have yet to see mainstream media make a big deal out of this drug plague. They don't even want to talk about white men in this country that are your biggest cop killers. They won't even talk about that. And we damn know this drug plague has been going on for damn near 20 years. And mainstream media is still not trying to pick it up because they're trying to save the image of white people in this country. Your image is so badly damaged, it can't be salvaged. Okay, it just can't. Everything, and if you think it can, that's because you're fake. No, you got to be fake for centuries. But the image out there about you is so not you, and ain't even funny. And this is why many of them are walking around with this perceived notion that they're better than the black population. But when you start reading what's really going on within their communities, 84% of white people kill other white people. 68% of rapists are white males. Most cop killers in this country are white males. You don't look so rosy anymore. You never have. I mean, you're the people, you're the mothers and fathers of racism and slavery. And you can't even wash that stain off of yourselves. Okay? You have never successfully got that off of you. All you can do is walk around whining, oh, slavery's a long time ago. No, slavery's your prisons. And you never lived without slavery in America, not even to this day. You haven't proven not one decade or century in this country that you could live without slavery. Not once. How can opioid addiction be treated with so much sympathy and seen as a serious medical addiction when the same consideration was absent for African Americans during the crack epidemic that led to a lot of deaths and incarceration? As an Irish immigrant, this taught me about America's racial and class divide. It's almost shocking, said Monahan. Rednecks and Culchies, film that takes an intimate look into the stories of construction workers in St. Louis, Missouri, who worked for Monahan. Monahan highlights the ups and downs of the workers struggling to make it day by day while dealing with issues such as opioid addiction, alcohol, and political and social systems that they feel and apathetic towards their condition. Due to his own poor upbringing in Belmullet County, Mayo, Ireland, Monahan was able to relate to the plight of his workers. He is a self-proclaimed culchie. Culchie is a slang definition of an uneducated, low-class person in Ireland, and the Irish equivalent of a redneck without the stereotypes of racism associated with them. Monahan and his family experienced such extreme financial hardships that he had to quit school in order to work after only 5 years of formal education. I'm just laughing because when I used to go down in the South, I used to come across a lot of black people that these were elders. They were elders mainly that didn't have education, and it was the same way. You know, their parents were sharecroppers and they were forced to drop out of school and work the fields. And you see, you know, this man went through something very similar, you know. But here's my thing with Monahan. Although he may have struggled in Ireland, I'm not doubting that he did. In America, he still has more advantages as an immigrant, a white immigrant at that, than your average black person. So, I mean, I understand his plight, but I don't feel too bad for him. He's still got advantages that you and I don't have, and we've been here our whole lives. And just the simple fact that he's a white male and a European male on top of that in America. After growing up in Europe, he migrated to the United States and lived in New York and later St. Louis. It was in America that he saw similar struggles, but much more profound than in Europe. Monahan rose out of his own circumstances by starting a successful construction business in Missouri. See, that's what I'm saying. He's still a white male. Okay, right now, if a black man wanted to rise out of his poverty and start a construction business, there is no bank that's going to give him a loan. Okay, but this white European man, he can get a loan. He can get a loan a lot easier than those of us that have been here our whole life. So, no, I don't have that much sympathy for him. It is though his company that he got to know the stories of construction workers and the struggle working class. When I started hiring employees, I didn't understand how so many people could have such drastic drug issues. But the more I explored the segregation in class, the more I understood. Rednecks plus and coochies, culchies, coochies. I like that better. Is your story. I hope that though this film, people will recognize that there is a reason that people get hooked on drugs and there is a solution. Classism is one of America's greatest struggles, as is racism. But despite our economic differences, ethnicities, and culture, we must realize we are much more alike than we are different. No, we're not. We're not alike. I'm sorry. I disagree with that. I know a lot of people still walk around with that. We're all the same. No, we don't. No, we don't. As black people, we have no history of living a life like white people in this country. We are not the same. We have not lynched anybody. We did not form a group similar to the KKK and start putting white people in trees. We didn't do that. No, we are not alike. I hope that this documentary also helps people that care that they get the care that they need, Monahan said. Well, like I said, Monahan is still a white male, even though he's an immigrant from Europe. So just that alone in America, that is seen as something of a big deal in the land of white supremacy. So this man's plight could never be similar to the plight of black people at all. But the one thing I do like is how he, as an immigrant, is shedding light on probably the biggest plague ever seen in American history that American born people are trying their best to stay silent about. So I will give him credit for that. Tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. And also, please donate to my Hurricane Irma fund for the people in Florida. Peace, family.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to show you these statistics that came out July 29th, 2017. And I am going to put to rest once and for all, why most black people are in prison. You are not committing the most violent crimes. But I will show you why America is putting black people in prison. Now, as you can see on this chart, it has these letters underneath each bar. And I'm going to tell you what these are. Now, these are the federal inmates that are in jail. Federal Bureau of Prison. These are their statistics. These are statistics that comes directly from the government in this country. Okay? So let's look at why most people are in prison today in America. A, look at this category, A, bank and insurance counterfeit embezzlement. See, when people at the top rob a company or steal, it's not considered a big crime in America. That's why that number is very low. And there's all kinds of robbing and stealing on Wall Street. But that crime, because of the population of people that work in these jobs, you notice that percentage is very low. So only 0.3% of the people in prison are there for bank and insurance and counterfeit and embezzlement. Now B, look at this category. Burglary, larceny, property offenses. 4.7% of the prisoners are in there for category B. Let's go to C. C is continuing criminal enterprise. 0.2% of the inmates. And then we have D, courts or corrections, probably parolees, people that were out on parole and they did not stick with it. There are times when they were supposed to meet with the parole officer and they ended up back in prison, or they failed to show up in court. So that's 0.5%. That's D. E, I want you to take a good look at E, because E is the reason why most Black men in this country are mass incarcerated. Drug offenses, 46.3%. Okay, now if you look down this list, there is no percentage higher than the drug offenses. See, ladies and gentlemen, Black people have never been in there for the most violent crimes. They can't get you on the most violent crimes. The one thing they can get you on is drug offenses. This is why Jeff Sessions is sitting in his position as Attorney General talking about mass incarcerating people on marijuana, because they know, just from studying us, a lot of Black people smoke weed. They know this. This is why you notice he ain't talking about rounding up these opioid addicts or rounding up the heroin addicts or the ones that are out here doing fentanyl. No, he's not talking about them. He's not talking about rounding them up. He's talking about weed. Something that the Black community does, and they know this. Percentage is the highest on the entire chart. Look at it. Look at this bar. E. Look at it. You are not in there for no most violent crimes, ladies and gentlemen. Black people have never been in there for no most violent crimes. You are in there for non-violent drug offenses. And this is the proof. You can see this bar is way higher than all of the others. Even if you added up all the other percentages, it still does not supersede this. So when they say Blacks are the most violent, ladies and gentlemen, just know they are not telling you the truth. They are lying. And their government is showing that they are lying. Extortion, fraud, and bribery, F. And then we have G, homicide, aggravated assault, and kidnapping offenses, 3.2% of the prison population. And then we have H, which is immigration. And you can see even the drug offenses is higher than immigration, 7.9% of the prison population in there for immigration. Miscellaneous, 0.7%, which is I. National security. National security is so low, it don't even register as a percentage, 0.0. Robbery, okay. K, 3.8% of the people in prison are there for robberies. And sex offenses, 9%, all right, which is right here, I. I'm sorry, L. And weapons, explosives, arson, 17.1% M. I mean, even that's nowhere near the percentage for the drug offenses right here, E. Okay? So, no, Black people are not in there for the most violent offenses. We never been in there for the most violent offenses. And now let's look at the prison population by race. Okay, let's look at it by race. Here's race. Now, I'm going to explain to you why the white number is so large compared to everyone else. Okay, there's a lot of things going on right now. First of all, white women are number one in going to prison among females in this country. You can look this up yourself if you don't believe it. Actually, it's not nearly as many Black women going to jail. Most of the women going into prison today are white females. Number two, the Hispanics are merged in that number. Now, this is what makes me laugh. When it comes down to padding up the numbers in the US Census, it's okay to put Hispanics in the white category, just to make our numbers bulk up and look like we're a big presence in America. But when it comes down to jail, or they murder someone, or kill a cop, watch how fast white people run from the Hispanics. Oh, well, that guy ain't white. He's a Hispanic. Well, not according to your U.S. Census. According to your U.S. Census, Hispanics are white. And we know why you're doing that. You got to keep bulking up your numbers because actually European whites in this country are small. You only look big, number one, because of immigration. You use the immigrants that come to this country, and you have always used the Hispanic population until they get in trouble. Then you don't want nothing to do with them. You want to distance yourself from a George Zimmerman type of person. The cop that shot, just like talking about Michael Bennett. Oh, well, that wasn't white cops. Those cops they were Hispanic. Those weren't white cops. I had a couple of people come in my comment section and write that. But it's awfully funny when it comes time to pad up the numbers. Hispanics are fine to be as far as being white. But when they get in trouble or they do something that's looked upon as wrong, they always try to make Hispanic something else. I'm just saying. So now let's look at the inmates. 1.5% of the inmates are Asian. 37.8% are Black. 2.2% Native Americans, and 58.6% are white. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. I will leave this article in my description box. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. And ladies and gentlemen, also, if you can make a donation to my hurricane fund for Florida, I would deeply appreciate it. Right now, I have $72 raised. It's going to take more than that to help the people down there. And I would like to help, because there's all kinds of issues going on in Florida, just like in Houston. You have many of our people living through the price gouging. I even heard from one of my relatives recently, and they were telling me how gas and food and water, everything's being price gouged, even plane tickets with certain airlines. I think it was one of the airlines charging $3,500 a ticket if you wanted to fly out of there. That is outrageous. All right. Peace, family.
Okay, as you may know, America leads the entire world in drug addiction. This just came out on CNBC. Americans are hoarding a massive black market supply of opioids. Why am I not surprised? So, your biggest black market buyer of opioids are Americans. What happened the last time you were prescribed an opioid? If you're like most people, you didn't finish them and you didn't dispose of them. In effect, you are a potential source of illicit drugs and addiction that has been exploding across America. This rogue supply of painkiller is alarming, given the latest data on addiction deaths. Even after years of heightening attention from politicians and the press to the nationwide opioid plague, in 2016 saw an increase in overdose deaths of 21%, with rates of synthetic opioids death doubling. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there are around 200 million opioid scripts a year. It's an extraordinary reserve, says Kenneth Humphrey, a professor of psychiatry and behavior science at Stanford University, who worked on a drug policy for the Obama administration. That's just as many scripts as there are adults. It's such a huge reservoir to tap. Lots of people just don't think about it, Humphrey said. As many as 92% of patients don't finish their painkiller, and less than 10% dispose of them properly, either flushing them down the toilet or returning them to a hospital pharmacy or law enforcement. I never thought about giving my opioids. Now, when I had them, the remaining ones that I had, I just flushed down the toilet. If I call law enforcement, are you kidding me? I'm calling them psychotic. Get out of here. According to a new study published in the Journal of JAMA Surgery, for almost every injury we look at, patients had pills they didn't use, said Johns Hopkins pain management specialist Mark Bickett, who led the study. They become a source of illicit use. Other adults use them, and children and adolescents can find them when they're exploring, he said. At least two-thirds of a total of 810 patients didn't use their entire opioid prescription, but kept the unused pills, according to the data John Hopkins studies. And roughly 75% of patients ignored warnings to keep opioids in a locked cabinet. If it was only one or two pills, it would be one thing, Bickett said. But most patients have more than 10, almost the entire prescription, just lying around. He said many patients hoard the drugs, not not to get high, but so they can react to a relapse of pain or some new injury without seeing a doctor again. Many patients stop taking pills because their pain has receded, according to between 42% and 71% of those studied. A smaller group of patients stop taking the pills because of side effects. Either way, leaving the pills around the home leads to abuse. Some teenage kids want to experiment, but a teenager can also be entrepreneurial, Humphrey says. You know what? That's one thing I never did. I never went in my parents' pill bottles and took their pills. Hell, I barely wanted to take a damn aspirin. But that was one thing I never did as a teenager. Oh, please. These people will do anything to be high. You can sell 20 milligrams of OxyContin pill for $20 on the street. He added that other threats are beyond a family's ability to foresee. There have been cases where visitors to a real estate open house clean out pill cabinets. Oh my goodness. So when people are going around looking at a house that's up for sale, these junkies are going in people's pill cabinets and stealing their drugs. Wow. That's the one thing I never thought about until now. Now, I know they rob pharmacies. I know, people are stealing from hospitals, veterinarian offices. I never thought about someone looking at your house for sale and stealing your drugs. Wow. Woo, there's no level they won't stoop to, ladies and gentlemen. Opioids account for 2 million people with a substance abuse problem, according to the American Association Society of Addiction Medicine. Most people with opioid problems began by using pills. They were prescribed as pain relievers, but more recent twists in the plague include the resurgence of heroin addiction and abuse of fentanyl. The drug that's, oh, forget it, I'm getting out of there. Overdose in 2016 killed more than 64,000 Americans, with the largest number coming from people who abuse prescription pills such as oxycodone and hydrocodone, who brand names versions are OxyContin and Vicodin. More recently, the growth in overdose deaths have come mostly from fentanyl and heroin. The CDC data shows. Give away your painkillers to the right people. The simplest thing patients can do to dispose of prescription drugs properly is to simply flush them down the toilet. That's what I did with mine, Bickett said. Patients are right to fear doing environmental damage by flushing. The Drug Enforcement Administration has stated it can affect the water supply, but it's still a better option than leaving unused pills around the house. It's a trade off risk, Humphrey said. I think the candid answer a DEA official would give you is that flushing down the toilet isn't good because it's not good to throw toxic chemicals into the water supply. But flushing, although bad, is less bad than hoarding. Okay, let me just go down a little more. Initially, focus on law enforcement location of drop off. The Obama administration expanded the program late in 2014, giving pharmacies, hospitals, clinics, and other authorized collectors the ability to take back drugs. CVS, among other companies, now offer customers the ability to drop off unused prescriptions. Patients and their family members can also mail their prescription controlled substances to an authorized collector using prepaid mail back packages that can be obtained at a pharmacy or from other locations like libraries and community centers. If drop off is not an option, the DEA recommends preparing unused drugs for disposal by mixing with coffee grounds or use cat litter, sealing them, and throwing them in the garbage. Humphrey said these efforts work to a point. All right. So, coffee grounds and kitty litter. All right, let me just go down a little further. The Johns Hopkins study doesn't limit culpability to patients. Analyzing data from 6 previous opioid studies, Bickett found that doctors are failing to keep tabs on where all those pills go. Surgeons may not be aware of the magnitude of the problem, Bickett said. Doctors and patients are changing how they work with opioids, but need to do more. The simplest solution is not to prescribe addictive painkillers. Over the counter painkillers like Tylenol and Advil can be more effective than many patients think, especially when used with tandem, Bickett said. Alternating between the two can enable a patient to take more with low risk of toxic reaction than if the same patient used more than the recommended dosage of either one. So, ladies and gentlemen, what they're really ultimately saying is these unused pills are ending up on the black market, and Americans are the biggest buyer of those pills on the black market. That's pretty much to sum it up in a nutshell, because this nation is, where the biggest junkies are on the entire planet. Sad to say, but it's true. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. And I will leave the link to this article in the description box. Peace, family. All right, this is a story that came out on WPRI.com. And here's a state we don't talk about a lot. Fentanyl-related overdose deaths continue to climb in Rhode Island. All right, let's go ahead and listen to this video.
Try out Four Seasons with dual temperature. Now to a Target 12 investigators exclusive. We're learning overdose deaths related to the super potent drug fentanyl have overtaken other illicit drugs in Rhode Island, and the numbers show it's getting worse. Like many states, Rhode Island is grappling with the opioid crisis, but overdose deaths from fentanyl now outnumber accidental deaths from all other drugs combined. Target 12 investigator Tim White is here now with the details.
According to the CDC, fentanyl is a powerful painkiller that is also manufactured illegally on the streets. It's often mixed with other drugs like heroin and cocaine that even in small amounts can be lethal.
As the night wore on, I just had bad thoughts, the worst thoughts you can have as a parent.
In 2014, Sue Kutu's daughter, Kristen, had just returned from a rehab facility in Texas. She told her mom she was having dinner with a friend, then heading to a support meeting.
And when I opened the door, there were two policemen there, and they said, I didn't even let them speak at first, and I just said, please don't tell me my daughter's dead.
The 29-year-old had suffered a fatal overdose. Kutu says her daughter was a heroin user, but investigators say she was sold nearly pure fentanyl. Do you think Kristen knew how much fentanyl was in the drug that she took?
I don't think Kristen thought there was any fentanyl in the drug that she took.
Unfortunately, it's our #1 crisis still going on.
Department of Health Director Dr. Nicole Alexander Scott says overdose deaths have ticked up in the last few years, 290 in 2015 and 336 in 2016.
Our modeling shows that we may plateau around the same number. More than one death is unacceptable in our minds.
The data shows fentanyl is a growing cause behind those deaths. In 2014, 35% of overdose deaths in Rhode Island were fentanyl related, according to numbers from the Department of Health. That grew to 47% in 2015, 59% in 2016, and so far this year, 60% of overdose deaths in Rhode Island are linked to fentanyl. Hearing those numbers, how frustrated are you?
I'm very frustrated. I'm frustrated that we aren't able to get a handle on this situation. I'm frustrated that we haven't thought out of the box.
Kutu says going cold turkey, like the rehab her daughter received, does not work. She says people need to embrace medicated-assisted treatment using drugs like Suboxone long-term to curb cravings. And she urges parents to talk to their kids and not to ignore signs.
Love them as much as you can. Just love your children so much. And that alone gives them a feeling of belonging and being part of something bigger than themselves. Family is so important.
The man who sold Kristen Kutu the fentanyl-laced heroin pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and received a 20-year prison sentence. It's the first time in Rhode Island a drug dealer was convicted of murder in an overdose case. With the Target 12 investigators, Tim White, Eyewitness News.
The Target 12 investigators are always looking to uncover news. If you want to help expose corruption or drop a dime on government waste, you can call our tip line 228-1763 or email us at target12@wpri.com.
All right. Now, the powerful and often potentially deadly drug fentanyl continues to grow as the leading cause of fatal overdoses in Rhode Island, according to Rhode Island Health Department data. Back in 2014, 35% of overdose deaths were fentanyl related. The share grew to 47% in 2015 and then hit more than half, 59% in 2016. The increase has continued this year. As of September, 60% of overdose deaths in 2017 are linked to the drug, data shows. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, fentanyl got its start as a synthetic drug typically prescribed to people suffering severe chronic pain. But most of the fentanyl behind overdoses is linked to illegally made fentanyl. It is often mixed with heroin and or cocaine as a combination product with or without the user's knowledge to increase its euphoric effects, according to the CDC's website. So, a lot more things are being laced with fentanyl nowadays, including marijuana. I'm starting to read more and more stories about that. Now, the cocaine laced with fentanyl, that actually started in New York. That's where the first deaths of cocaine users hit in the country. And now it's pretty much spreading everywhere, as you can see, even in Rhode Island. Our model shows we may plateau around the same number as of 2016, Alexander Scott said Friday during a taping of WPRI 12's newsmaker. More than one death is unacceptable in our minds, but we are acknowledging the increase other states are seeing. We are hopefully seeing a flattening of that, and we really want to see a decrease in those numbers. Well, that's kind of wishful thinking at this point because we know everything is increasing everywhere around the country. And that's because the street drug is strong. And as long as the street drug is strong, they really have no chance of cutting the addiction in half in America. So, you see even the tiny state of Rhode Island is battling with pretty deadly fentanyl drug deaths and overdoses. And it's just all the same no matter where you are in this country. I will leave the link to this article in the description box. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, ladies and gentlemen, please do. And if you can also make a donation to the Hurricane Fund. As of now, I have $72. I would like to raise that higher so it can go towards helping our brothers and sisters down there in Florida that are in need. Peace, family. All right, this is one of these crazy, crazy stories, ladies and gentlemen. There was a man being interviewed on BBC Live, and his dog apparently got a hold of his crack cocaine and ate it and killed this man on live TV. His own dog, high on crack cocaine, killed him on live TV. This is a story that came out in the Daily Star. I will leave the link to this story in the description box. Dog mauled owner to death during BBC Live broadcast after eating his crack cocaine. Woo, man, that's some screwed up mess here. And this is the guy right here, looks like a junkie. Producer Joshua Dowell wrestled the dog off Mario. He was taken to the hospital, but medics could not save him. Mr. Haddo, I guess is Haddo, told North London Coroner's Court the dog had seemed very peaceful and friendly. Drug experts Nicholas Carmichael revealed cocaine and morphine was found in Major's urine. So the dog's name was Major. Okay. And there they are trying to help this man after he was brutally attacked by his dog high on crack cocaine on live TV. He said, "It is highly likely that this attack happened because the dog had taken cocaine." You think? Didn't they used to do that to pit bulls, or probably still do? They used to give them cocaine before they got into fights. I remember I hearing something like that during dog fights. Maybe some of you may know this, and just write it in the comment section if you do. Coroner Andrew Walker ruled the death at a flat at Wood Green, North London, in March due to dog attack injuries. Police said Major will be put down. So I guess they put the dog to death. Wow. That is some freaky mess. Not so much the dog getting a hold of it, because these things even happen in this country where people will leave their drugs around and the dog will eat the drugs. But this dog took his ass out on live TV. Now, that is some jacked up mess. Please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. I guess that dog was like, how you gonna let me take some crack cocaine, and took him out. Peace, family.
This is a story that just came out on NPR. And this just goes back to how difficult it is for drug addicts and even former drug addicts to get into the workforce, because companies simply do not trust these people. Many of the recovered addicts have rap sheets because, when you are a drug addict, sooner or later you run out of money and then you turn to crime. The powerful pull of opioids leave many missing from U.S. workforce. Jonathan Guffey has chiseled youthful looks, and at 32 does not have the haggard bearing of someone who has spent more than half his life hooked on opioids. That stint with the drugs started at 15 and ended, he says, for good 22 months ago. He has a job working with his family in construction, but his work history is pockmarked by addiction. I've worked in a couple of factories for a short amount of time, probably just long enough to get the first paycheck to get high off of, Guffey said. I met Guffey at a Road to Redemption, a weekly free dinner and support meeting at a church in Muncie, Indiana, for people in or seeking recovery. He says his habit was enabled by others, family, friends, and even a boss at a factory where he once worked. There were plenty of times when I wouldn't go to work there, and my boss would call me, and he wouldn't even say anything about work. He would just want more opaques, pills, or whatever it was that I could get at that time, Guffey says. So he was a junkie, and so was his boss. Economists estimate 1.5 million work-age people are missing from the labor force, not working or looking for work. It is not clear to what extent the country's heroin and opioid painkiller plague is affecting declining participation, especially among prime-time age men, those 25 to 54. And that's the same age group that commits the most suicide. But in many communities, such as Muncie, It is clear that the proliferation of opioid abuse is having a big enough impact for employers and the community to take notice. Those with opioid addictions tell strikingly similar stories in which work takes a back seat to an intensifying compulsion for the drug. They're sleepy on them and horribly sick when they aren't. They said the physical impact is worse than the other drugs. Those I interviewed described a deepening alienation that ultimately includes both family and work. In lieu of jobs, most say they eventually supported themselves by dealing drugs. I lived and breathed drugs and shunned both work and relationships, says Jennifer Smith, who shows me a mugshot of herself taken 6 months ago, just before she got sober. In it, she is thinner, with dark bags under her eyes, looking a decade older than aggregate, less lethal than alcohol. But the data shows opioids affect users' work life more. Research from the National Safety Council, or the NARC, research group at the University of Chicago shows opioid users miss twice as many days of work than those with alcohol addiction. According to Princeton economist Alan Kruger, 47% of prime-age men not in the labor force use pain medication, and 2/3 of that subgroup use prescription drugs. Melissa Wallace, ex-husband, and 3 children all wrestled with various addiction. She also owns a small cleaning business that hires some people in recovery. So she has seen how the disease affects both workers and employers. There is the trust issue, she says. Even if they're clean, I can trust this person in people's homes or businesses. Well, that depends. Oftentimes they relapse. So there's reliability, and are they going to show up? Wallace works for Roads to Redemption, says opioid addiction strikes the rich, poor, and the promising. I know a lot of kids' friends have fallen into the trap, in and out of jail. Friends have fallen into the trap, in and out of jail, she says. Kids that if you would have been a gentleman's club and it was instant money, and those are the type of things I would have never imagined myself doing. She dropped out of college. She says among her circle of a dozen high school friends, 7 are dead of opioid overdoses. See, it's a lot. It's a lot. And personally, I believe they're undercounting the numbers on an annual basis too, or related car accidents or medical crisis. Sexton sobered up a month ago, only to confront a felony possession charge that might cost her a nursing assistant's license, the only thing remaining of her career plans. What's more, she says it might mean she won't be able to go back to school, possibly ever, if these charges stick. Oh, they won't. I will not be able to get any federal loans because they won't give them to felons, Sexton says. Oh, it don't matter. They'll wipe her record clean and it'll be like nothing happened. A family point out it is not just the addicted whose careers suffer. I met Roger and Katiana Johnson on their front lawn, strewed with children's toys, evidence they've been working days driving Destiny to rehab and doctors, and that dealing with opioid addiction interrupted her own plans. Once you raise your kids, you want to be able to retire or something, she says. We weren't able to. We went ahead and took on our grandkids, she said, before being interrupted by someone's yelling, "Hey," in front of the house. It's Destiny Johnson released unexpectedly early because she tells her parents the jail was overcrowded. Her mother, who works the overnight shift at a local children's home, wears an expression that is both happy and worried because Destiny wasn't given a shot to control her opioid cravings. And once again, Katiana Johnson is rethinking her work schedule. Kind of makes me want to stay home tonight just to make sure she doesn't use, she says, adding that she'll lean on other family members if necessary.